Warning, this podcast contains scenes of explicit nonsense and lore.
Previously on the Resident Evil podcast.
And in fact is almost like a pawn of the connections. He thinks he's important, he thinks he's all in control, and he thinks he may be making the decisions for the connections, but I like the idea that there is still a big bad still to come.
Well, possibly, but then possibly not.
He thought he was the original, but he's just like a Kodak copy.
How many people comment on Leon Zombie in the back of the car and the OG RE2?
15 years. She should have the keys to the franchise. This franchise should be hers now. She's the lead in the generation of new characters, and being tied to a desk role is not necessarily where I wanted her to be.
The Resident Evil Podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 112.5 of the Resident Evil Podcast. More repulsive than Victor Gideon's breath and far more believable than a Spencer redemption arc. I'm Nick, better known as Neptune. Let's see who's joining us today. He's known to throw missiles at his enemies at Stars TyranT.
Hello there.
And now perpetually worried about injections in case he turns red and explodes. It's Rombie.
Hello.
Just us three for this podcast, but do not panic, ladies and gentlemen. No, this is our community call-in podcast. So we have views and opinions on Resident Evil Requiem from right across our community. We've had many call-ins from Discord members and patrons, and we're going to be going through all this. You can hear lots of different voices today, so always exciting. We always look forward to our community call-ins because there's always stuff we've forgotten about, or or people raise discussion points that we can dig into a little bit more. We have had quite a few, which is great. So we're going to try and be as succinct as possible. So apologies in advance if we don't spend a huge amount of time speaking about your point, but it's all been listened to, so we can all enjoy. We also have latest news, and we're finishing off with another edition of Neptune's Biohazard Quiz. But let's start with the news. First bit of news comes from the world of Steam. Resident Evil 1, 2 and 3 are coming out on Steam. Very exciting. So that means you better play it on your Steam Deck and the Steam machine when it comes out. And presumably PCs as well, if you've got Steam on your PC, which is great.
Yes, Nick. Mainly, I would say.
Okay, right.
It's mainly the sort of desktop and laptop.
Wait, what do you mean? Steam comes on PC now?
Apparently so. I don't know anything about Steam.
Yeah, I mean, from what I understand, there's a couple of... I think they've patched... there was a Steam Deck issue with a couple of the titles, but I think they are pretty much all patched now, with possibly the exception of Resident Evil 3. But I think there are little workarounds you can do to get them working on the deck. And from what people are saying, they work great. Portable OG trilogy.
It's good news, isn't it? Having it available on more wider platforms, bringing them back. You get the impression Capcom are kicking and screaming about doing so. Perhaps more than they should be, but it is positive. But they're here.
Yeah, we're just nearly there now. We just need the Switch. And
yes,
then the Xbox, and then everybody's got them, and everybody's happy. So we're nearly there. If you rewind back 5 years, I don't think we ever thought this day was going to come. So gradually it is happening, and it's only a good thing.
Yeah, and we've got plenty of time left for the 30th anniversary for a potential collection on disc. Maybe we keep asking, we keep hoping, but one step at a time. Requiem news. Yes, so we're continuing with that. The Capcom have added a new photo mode, which has got people excited. There's been a really cool use of photo mode actually in the wider community. I've seen loads of pictures online getting Grace and Leon into quite amusing poses with the BOWs, almost like doing, kind of peace out signs. It looks like it anyway. You got to be careful, some could be AI, don't like that, but there's lots of really good photos that people have been able to take throughout the game. I haven't had the chance to utilize it yet, but not sure if anyone else has. Is it good?
I haven't used
No,
it
not
yet.
yet.
Either, I'm afraid.
Neither have I, unfortunately. I haven't had the chance now.
I know people love photo mode because it's in a lot of games, isn't it? It's a kind of big deal. It's not something I'm.
Some people get obsessed, do get obsessed with it, and it was quite funny. I just it was Jack Quaid was on one of those talk shows, the guy from The Boys and a whole bunch of stuff, and he was talking about him taking photos. I think it was like Kimmel or Fallon or something, and he was showing photos he took in Spider-Man show. And I'm just like, okay, so this is where photo mode's gotten to now. Like, you've got people on talk shows talking about photo modes and that they got addicted to during COVID. It's like quite funny. I'm like, it's hilarious. There'll be a lot of people making really creative images. I mean, people were trying. I'd already seen some stuff online, like especially. I don't know what it is. It's a really big thing in Japan, I think, as well. I saw a lot of Japanese players trying to like position the camera before the photo mode to take some interesting angles and stuff. So where they could. So like once a photo mode comes in, you get some really creative stuff.
Another little, very minor tidbit that you may have missed. They've actually updated the report by Grace that she does at the end, the kind of big 30-page or whatever it is document recounting the events. They've slightly updated it to correct the minor localization. Yeah, exactly. The Wesker, the Spencer's goals, if you like, his main ambitions going forward. He mentions a T virus, and then it's I can't even remember, but like the Wesker project, and it's worded in a way that doesn't quite align with what we know in Resident Evil 5. So it's been tweaked to make it clear that Project W, Project Wesker, is still an important part of Spencer's plan, which it always was the case in the Japanese version, but it didn't read quite as well in.
No, I think it's because it was referred to as just simply as the Wesker plan.
That was it, the Wesker plan,
which wasn't terrifically clear, whereas it has been reworded to Wesker Project now.
Project, yes.
Yeah, so that's a nice thing. They don't often do it. The last time I think they did something like that, at least between perhaps regions, was the difference between Resident Evil 0 American Edition and the PAL Edition.
Which unfortunately got changed back in the HD version.
Oh, did it? Oh no! So people don't know that they got the dates wrong in terms of when
it's off by 10 years.
It was it was 88. I remember in the American version.
It was 78.
78. That was it. Sorry, it was 70. It should have been 88.
And then the HD version, unfortunately, because they worked off the European, so the US translation, the file goes back to 78, and I don't think that's been corrected. I could be wrong that it hasn't been re-corrected, but the last time I played that, it still said 78.
I think Revelations got a fix as well, didn't it, in the HD edition? Didn't they rename like the wildlife thing? The wildlife company was changed.
Oh yeah, that was a really bad translation, wasn't it? Yeah. Death Island news, yes. The island that refuses to die. Completely unexpectedly, and, a surprise to be sure. The official localization of the Death Island manga is coming out on October the 6th. I did not see this coming, I have to be brutally honest. Annoyingly, because literally a week before, I'd purchased the Japanese version, which now sits proudly on my desk, thinking, well, there's no way this is coming out on in English. And a week later, completely out of the blue, that's coming. So if you've not read that, I haven't read it because it's in Japanese, but yeah, that's coming out, which is quite cool. There's a zombie lion in it, ladies and gentlemen. So if you're excited about that, and I am, I do like the good old zombie lion. That's a new bit in it. Yeah,
so that's gonna fix all of the movie's issues, isn't it?
There's a zombie lion in it. We're all good. And then Leon poses for the selfie with it or something. It
does annoy me that Heavenly Island's just lost.
Yes.
So translation hell, isn't it?
Yeah. You can pick it up in German, can't you? That's the only place where it's officially as Resident Evil, whereas everything else it's all Biohazard.
Of all the mangas, like putting aside the obvious gratuity to one side, it's the most connected of all the mangas to several of the titles. It's actually, once you get past the survival idol stuff, is a really good Resident Evil story in there.
You've got...
It's just disappointing. It's just lost to
was it Alex Wesker
translated?
Alex Wesker, there's hunters in it. There's a new.
Well, I know you in particular, Nick, will just love the Umbrella Corps callbacks, weren't you?
I was all over that. There's Sheng Yar's in it, Sheng Yar
Yeah.
Corporation.
And the zombie jammer.
Merchandising news. I don't know if this has been officially announced yet. I've only actually seen it on a Facebook page, but there are some new Resident Evil Funko Pops apparently coming. Contain your excitement, please, gents. But we've got a new Leon, a new Jill, which is less exciting. But apparently there's Wesker and Chainsaw Man, Dr. Salvador, is coming as well in Funko Pops.
Chainsaw Ganado.
Yeah, they can. Yeah, I don't. The thing with Funko, I don't dislike them, but I don't rush for them. I just find the look of them a bit funny, and I think they work well if you don't have a human character. So I've got a Licker and the Nemesis, and I think they work quite well because they're monsters. So that kind of like dead eye that the Funkos have work quite well for them. So I'm expecting Wesker and Chainsaw Ganado to equally look quite, work well, because you won't be able to see their dead eye, whereas Leon and Jill will be. That's just my personal take. I know people do love their Funkos, so they're better than the Ducks.
Nick's just casually breaking the hearts of many of our listeners.
I know. I'm sorry, but I'll get some. I do. I went to Comic-Con this year, and they had the TyranT, which I really wanted, but I refused to pay £110 for it.
The original ones have become quite expensive. I think like the Hunter's the cheapest of the lot, and even then it's not like ultra cheap. It's just the most cheapest, and then like the Leon and Jill ones are like stupid expensive now.
Really? Well,
yeah.
There's new ones coming apparently, but we'll see.
They'll probably become the same very expensive collectibles, which is I'm the same as you, Nick. I'm not a big Funko fan at all. I do have some that people keep tending to give them to me as gifts, as if they thought I would want them, which is fine. It doesn't bother me. It's nice. I appreciate the idea of it. But you said so I have two random sub collections of Office Space and Scrubs.
Right.
and then a few random ones that people have given me, like a Kevin Smith one and a Weird Al Yankovic one. And I just see the amount of plastic that's, and I'm just like, this is the company's not, if you haven't been following, it hasn't been doing particularly well of late, because I think the market's been oversaturated. So I was wondering when the bubble would burst, and I'm surprised it's still limping its way along. So unfortunately, people, I know, even if there's fans listening, I apologize, but I just don't get it.
That does finish all the Resident Evil news. I just wanted to end by thanking our new patrons. We had a few that have joined us since the last podcast. A big thank you to Nathan, Lun Apocalypse, Booner, Western Movies, Ben Poulson, Ron Perkins, and Andy McLean. Thank you so much for joining our Patreon. If anyone's interested, of course, you can head over to Patreon itself, search for the Resident Evil podcast, or click on our community tab, and there's a link at the bottom there if you are interested in joining. That does finish all our news. We'll now turn our attention to Resident Evil 9 once again, and we'll open up the telephone lines. Remember them for our Resident Evil 9 community call-in special.
Anne?
Hi, Mom.
You have been on that thing all day.
Well, if you're gonna work so late.
Get some sleep, eh?
I'm almost done. Just a sec.
What am I gonna do with you?
What you always do? Nag at me until I go to bed?
Oh, it's really coming down hard.
Mom, phone. Mom.
It's right beside you.
Hello?
Miss Ashcroft?
Yes.
Who was it?
Dunno. They asked for Miss Ashcroft and then they hung up on me. Rude. What the?
They're coming. Grace, we need to go.
Go where? Mom, what's going on?
Hurry.
Wait, who's coming? What's wrong?
Shh. We need to keep our voices down.
This is ridiculous.
Come on.
Tell me what's going on.
Now is not the time. Stay close.
Oh, who's that? Oh, I'm so sorry about the power outage.
What happened?
Oh, it's probably the electrical panel. It's 40 years old, so it doesn't take much to trip it. It's really no excuse, and I apologize for the inconvenience.
Oh, no, it's fine.
Yeah, don't worry.
I should have it fixed soon. I just need to find my...
What the hell, Mom?
No, Grace. No.
Welcome one and all. We hope everyone has enjoyed Resident Evil Requiem. I still think from a gaming point of view, it's still generating a lot of chat, people seemingly really enjoying it. And the ongoing kind of, I suppose not issues, but people I think are quite excited about where the DLC might go. There's plenty of options which we discussed in the last podcast. And
Capcom put out a really interesting statistic, and I haven't got it to hand now. Could maybe get it for later. But like something like 60% of all players have actually finished it, which is alarmingly high a statistic for a game like this. So they must have done something right if people wanted to see the journey through to the end.
Yeah, and the sales figures certainly back that up, don't they? It's all looking positive. No doubt we'll come back to Requiem later in the year with the story DLC. So it'd be interesting to see, for argument's sake, let's say it's another 6 months. It'd be interesting to see where the kind of lay of the land is with Requiem. As time moves on. Right. Let's start. As I said, we've opened up the telephone lines for our community. We've had a number of call-ins for this podcast, so we're really pleased with that. So thank you, everyone. Our first one comes in from our patron, Aaron Z, or Z, if you're in America.
Hey guys, Aaron here. So Resident Evil Requiem then. The game itself, great, scary, good fun in places. The chronic care facility is excellent, and it's one of the best Resident Evil areas. The perfect mix of tension and horror. One of my biggest concerns going into this was that switching to Leon after Grace's sections would feel a little bit jarring. Grace's gameplay was marketed as survival horror, but honestly, the first real switch was such a cathartic moment. Leon's opening section in Raccoon City is the weakest element of the game. Too much The Last of Us in my Resident Evil. The stuff in the RPD is still a highlight for me, and everything I wanted from Leon in the game. The emotional weight of all of it just felt so heavy. The bad guys in this game, nah. You guys have talked around all these points, so what I want to focus on is the characters, and mainly Grace Ashcroft. Angela St. Albano should win all the awards. Her characterization is great. Grace is vulnerable, grounded, reactive, and believable. Arguably one of the most human protagonists the series has had, which makes her horror feel real for the gamer. The first couple of hours was seriously some stressful stuff. She's always nervous, and the stutter is a really great addition which makes her more personable. Rather than this undermining her though, these traits make her feel human. For a franchise that usually has its protagonist project confidence, Grace reacts like an ordinary person thrown into extraordinary circumstances. Now let's talk about Leon. Originally, I wasn't too hot on him returning, but what they achieved from an emotional level was exactly what I wanted here. So well done, Capcom. What I find interesting is that Requiem dares to do something slightly different with him. His characterization leans into the weariness, suggesting that the long-term toll of repeated exposure to this world is beginning to affect him. He's still capable, and in fact very capable and decisive in action, but there's a sense that survival has come at a cost. Leon's personality remains. He's still Leon. Having Nick Apostolides come back to voice him again helps with that, but it's also Nick's strongest outing as Leon. As someone who doesn't really gel with Leon after RE2, I like the dry humour here. It just felt right. It felt like he just couldn't be bothered at this stage. In contrast to earlier portrayals, there's less of a flashy action hero edge and more emphasis on subtle resilience. He doesn't just fight because he can, he does it because he feels responsible. But anyway, enough from me. 9 out of 10. Great game.
Interesting points. Aaron was focusing heavily on the characterizations and the voice acting as well in particular.
Yeah.
I would 100% agree with him over the voice acting. Especially Grace. I think she really is the standout in Requiem.
Yeah, I think his point he makes about her being vulnerable and realistic is actually more applied to her, ironically, than even Ethan, even though he was supposed to be like, an avatar for the player originally. She feels a lot more grounded than even he is, because he kind of becomes quite indestructible early on, and she retains that vulnerability throughout.
But you also see it's subtle enough that you see growth and change in her over the course of the events too, which is nice. It doesn't fully shake everything, but it for obvious reasons, you kind of it gets into a bit more confidence by the end, which is really also earned. My only thoughts in regards to Leon is I really did enjoy all the stuff that Aaron pointed out. I really did enjoy it, and I feel like unfortunately it could have gone further. Like Sean and I talked about this a little bit as well. It's like the whole conversation between him and Sherry in regards to like what happened in Raccoon could have been very much expanded upon, which would then add more weight, and that would give opportunities for Leon to talk about the other things that he's seen and witnessed in his time working for various departments and fighting for these various fights. But it's a criticism that I could weigh because I want that. But what is there is still great, don't get me wrong. I just think there could have been an opportunity to show that wariness through more dialogue and for more conversation to happen about Leon's history with this entire situation that all started in Raccoon. So, yeah, it's the other thing I can really say about that.
We talked about it last time, didn't we? But that carrot dangle of the Sherry conversation really just leaves so much left on the table to explore.
I find though with these games, I mean, I think that happens regularly. It's very rare that you get any moments where someone is looking back entirely. It always seems to be focused. So, like, take Resident Evil 5 and Lost in Nightmares specifically. You get there, oh my god, we're back at the Spencer Mansion. It's very tailored around this. Requiem is very tailored around, say, Resident Evil 2. As you say, there's no mention of Plagas or, this was, Spain or any or the CGI event, anything like that. It's all very self-contained within the narrative that they want to tell, which is fine. But I think we know at this point Leon's been through so much. A mention of Lang Shang or something would be like, that's nice.
You say that, but I mean, I nearly did fall off my chair when Zeno talks about the fact that the president tried to expose something with him and assassinated for it. So that was a callback I was not expecting.
Yeah. The other element, which I think Aaron pointed out, which is that the gameplay element of the East Raccoon is very Last of Us, and ironically, the one thing I would have preferred they took from Last of Us was the way that characters converse while things are happening. Narratively that expands the world that they're in while they're traversing the areas, and sometimes that's characters. Obviously, in that game, it's characters together, but Leon's got constant open comms to Sherry. So if there's one thing that they could have taken from The Last of Us that probably would have improved that section, would have changed the flow, is if you had that constant chatter back and forth as Leon uncovered things and they talked more about the fact that the zombies aren't dead and there's still monsters around, and then when events happen, like what's been going on. Because they have a very brief conversation after Leon comes across the BSAA soldiers' corpses. He basically orders her to find out what more at her end, and that's all that conversation they have about it. Whereas there's a great opportunity again there for them to talk about what the BSAA was in there for, and what this means for Raccoon City and for the world and for viruses and all this sort of stuff. And again, missed opportunity. I just think Capcom needs to look at those elements and go, we could really create some more interesting narratives by having more conversation in these sorts of environments like this, especially if they are going to go do that again. Because I think it's one of those things I think the feedback's going to say to them, it was okay, but don't do that again kind of thing. Because I think the majority of players, especially when replaying, have said, so it feels a bit of a slog with not a lot of events happening. My take on that also, just before we can move on, is that I think it's okay as long as there's enough events that are highlighted to be interesting. So if the RPD section and onwards is kind of like there's an event and then something happens and then there's an event and then there's a boss fight, there's a bit of a flow to it. But the East Raccoon bit beforehand really just doesn't have a lot of pacing to it because of the way you can tackle it. But if they'd had a bunch of here's a boss fight, here's an event, here's a thing more frequently, and there was more narrative going on, things were actually progressing, I think that area wouldn't feel like so much of a slog, especially on replays.
Thank you, Aaron. Very, very, very much. Thank you for the call-in. Very useful. Our next call-in comes in from Ellie Cool. So let's play the tape.
Hi again, the Resident Evil podcast team. This is Eli Cool from the Discord. I would just like to give my thoughts on Resident Evil Requiem or Resident Evil 9, depending how you look at it. I thought the game was a very good game. It was entertaining. I find Grace to be a very good protagonist. Now, that saying, if they did the same thing with Ethan Winters in Resident Evil 7, I think he would have been better received. What they've done with Grace here is fantastic. I played her in first person only and left the third person to Leon, and I find that she was a great protagonist as she grew within the game, and especially with Emily, what happened to her. Then she went with your man Zeno, which it is what it is. He's what everyone thinks he is, and that's it. He's just an imitation, as Dr. Gideon would say. Leon's sections were good for what they were. I find Raccoon City to be a bit disappointing. It didn't feel great. His sections, and I find that the Ark wasn't a great section either. My most favourite section is probably the car centre. I think it's the best in the series thus far, especially if the zombies and all have some personality. And if you play the game and you just listen to the way they talk to each other, it's quite funny and all. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Resident Evil 9. Thank you for taking this call.
Thank you, Eli. Cool. Yeah, well, look at that. What a lovely segue into your comment there from Ethan. People might say that was not planned. That
was not planned, I promise. Yeah, great call in. Talking about the locations, I really do think it's going to go without saying the care centre is going to go down in the series history as being one of the finest locations, isn't it? It really is.
I agree. I think it's got the right blend, isn't it? And for I think we mentioned it vaguely, for something that is actually quite bright. It's not overly dark like the RPD was in Remake 2. Most of it is very well lit. It's only when you kind of get down into the underground bits and maybe the infirmary room with the red lights, it's all a bit dark. Everything else is very well lit, and that can create that kind of false safety net, which I think works really well because it's not a safe area. It really isn't, and yeah, it does. It works well. I mean, it's a
contrast well against all the blood as well. It makes it so much more visceral than I think the series has been before with regards to blood.
Yeah, definitely agreed.
Capcom are good at this, though. I mean, we've mentioned it before. Like, how many times have they done a prison? How many times have the prisons all felt so unique, despite having roughly the same sort of things? And if the Code Veronica remake is to believe, we're going to about to get another one. But it's right.
By that token, though, he says about how good the care centre. I think everybody is also pretty much unanimous in that the least popular part of the game is the bomb assembly at Raccoon City. I really like it because I just love the aesthetic so much, and I do find Leon's gameplay is really good in this. But I do appreciate, like on the fourth playthrough, it's just. You become so rehearsed to it. There's not really much variation in what you can do. I know you can change the order at which you get them and whatnot, but in terms of the progression through it, it's quite linear. So it just feels more like a chore, I think, on repeat playthroughs than an actual sort of a fun action set piece sequence or whatever like that.
And that's what I was saying before. It's just that thing, you need to break it up with things that happen that make it interesting, because otherwise it just becomes that thing. I don't think the concept behind having an open area like that is flawed. It's just how it's executed, and I just think that the intent of having you do things in different orders is well intentioned, but it's definitely it just has a pacing issue, really, especially upon replays. You're just like, you want some up and downs, you want the roller coaster, right? And it doesn't have that. It feels relatively consistent all the way through, which I'm sure from a design standpoint makes sense, but it just doesn't have those highs. You have one boss battle with the spider, and then it's just like basically there's a bunch of like mini fights. And
I was going to say, Rob, I mean, what do you think it would be better if they'd put the Titan spinner actually in the middle of the bomb process, as opposed to just randomly opening Raccoon with it?
I think so. That probably would have been a change. Or it was a case where Leon thinks he's defeated it and it comes back, or there's a second one that's even bigger, like something that changes the pace of it, or a pursuing enemy of some sort that keeps coming back. If it even wasn't Spider, something else that's like super strong, like just to break up the because a lot of it is, even though they come up with some ideas, like here's the petrol station, there's a chainsaw zombie, here's the rooftop, there's rooftop cannons. I love the tower, but I think that bit with all the glass is cool, such a cool concept. But even on replays, once you know what you're doing, you're kind of like it's done. And so finding ways to also change it up so that it maybe plays a little bit different on replays might have also been a bit of another idea. These are all just thoughts. They're not, nothing's right or wrong. It works, but it just needs to just things that will make it better for replays.
This reminds me, I'd said to you guys sort of vaguely, and we've never really talked about it since the game came out, but I did actually stumble across a spoiler image on Twitter back when the game leaked about 10 days before release. And to my shame, it was actually the TyranT in Raccoon.
Oh, no.
And one of the sort of leaks, as I say in inverted commas, said that the TyranT stalks you throughout the Raccoon City segment. Now, that turned out to not be true, but now I'm thinking about it, like, if the TyranT had been introduced earlier and had, like, the sort of random chase mechanic of Remake 2, but it happened throughout the bomb disposal, then that could have really mixed up the games each time, because you never quite know when he's going to turn up again. And, shit, he's in the warehouse now. And, on the next playthrough, maybe he doesn't turn up in the same place and stuff. A constant, persistent stalker, like you say, Rob, would have, and, the TyranT's there. He's in the game. All you have to do is just introduce him an hour earlier and he can be there stalking you through the bomb assembly. I said bomb disposal, bomb assembly.
Yeah, especially that kind of main street is really wide and open, isn't it? So you've got ways of avoiding, and perhaps now and again, you unlock a little bit, and there's another exploding barrel that you can try and use against the TyranT to give yourself 10 minutes or whatnot.
Well, especially with the idea that you can tackle this in different orders, so having him turn up at random times based on what you tackled too would be kind of cool. Let alone the idea that it could change based on replays, which I'm sure is also an option.
Now I'm thinking cool stuff like, what if he was in like the glass building? You can actually shoot him through the floor, and that, like you say, that takes him out of the equation for like 25 minutes. You've got like a good half an hour where he's not going to turn up again because he's got to work his way back up to the top or something. It'd be neat, wouldn't it? Oh, I hate it when we spitball ideas like this.
Well, let's move on then. Let's move on to our next call in. This one comes in from Doom GC.
Hey everyone, this is your not so evil French resident Doom GC. Well, Capcom did it again, didn't they? Resident Evil Requiem. It left a mark on me ever since the credit rolled. The kind you keep thinking of for a long time. I'm not good at romanticizing my opinion, so instead, to make my point across, here are the notes I took while playing on my first playthrough. Settings flexibility on PC is astounding. Capcom is again on top of their game. The polish level at release really is something to celebrate in this day and age. Having mouse sensitivity for first and third person is a godsend. The density of details in Renwood kept me there for half an hour. I did a Breakfast Club fist pump for Sean every time I saw Sherry on screen. Great team, her and Leon. I applaud Capcom for taking its time in the cutscenes. They do not fear pauses in dialogues and let the moment sink in. Victor on a bike is stupid. Did they really go into all the trouble of creating Grace clones and blood memory transfer just to get to a password? I really want to be in a writer's room someday. Next, Nathan. Nathan, Grace's boss, a huge prick. Sending your employee to investigate her mother's death location doesn't show your best, Nathan. Really, come on, man. Miranda's picture in Spence's office was a nice bone to throw. You really wonder now why he never contacted her, having a reminder of her in his face all the time like that. All in all, a solid experience I would rank above everything else, just on the rebirth for me. Experiencing fresh, new content for our beloved series really hit home and cannot be understated. Keep on your great work, guys. Cheers.
High praise there from Doom GC and flavoursome words with regards to Nathan, and I agree. I think a lot of people thought he's the bad guy when the trailers came out. Go, he'll be the baddie. He'll be the baddie. Why is he sending Grace to his mother's murder site
for another crime? Yeah, it's a bit. It still is. I've seen those memes going around where I don't know if you've seen it. I've seen these, Nick, but they're really funny. Where it's just like it's the shot of him saying, "So I'm going to send you to your mother's murder site to investigate the murder," and she's just like, "No, thanks." Passing on that one, and then it's like credits.
Roll credits, excellent. Doom GC obviously loved the game, and interesting comments about the PC port. I can't comment too much on the PC version.
It's really good. Yeah,
it's
solid on PC. It's so scalable as well. The engine's amazing.
And this is the thing I think we've talked about a little bit in the past, and not just about this game. It's just like the level of polish that Capcom puts into these games. You know, they're very, very rare issues with them, and they are. I mean, it's not flawless. There are people occasionally still find bugs, but compared to other companies' games, you know, like the polish is very high. The tech scalability now, especially with the RE engine stuff, is just really impressive. Obviously, there's still things that Capcom continues to improve and iterate every time they put out a new game, and they've learned a lot, say maybe for more bigger open worlds from the situation they had with Monster Hunter. So hopefully that feeds back into the whole engine, so which will improve Monster Hunter, would improve other RE engine games. There's a lot of praise about Pragmata, which has just come out this week as well under the same concepts. You know, it's using the RE engine and it's got some quite open areas, so very impressive tech for sure. Sean, you definitely deserve the fist bump in the air. You know, they did not forget about you.
With regards to Nathan, though, do you think that could be potentially saved for exploration in some DLC, that he actually was coerced or misled into sending Grace? Like, there's potentially more there.
I just assumed it was part of this.
Where she needed to be, yeah.
I just assumed it was part of this. He got manipulated just under that plan that's on the board at the end of the game. The step process. Because there's a whole bunch of like, if this happens, do this. If it doesn't happen, do this.
That is absolutely amazing. That's one of the most memeable things I think I've ever seen the series do. You know, basically like a boring office flowchart used by the masterminds.
It always reminds me, I don't know if you remember this, it was many, many years ago, Honest Trailers did a Honest trailer for, I think it was Batman v Superman, and they were trying to figure out like what was Lex Luthor's plan, and it's like a 30-point thing of like things that have to line up for this movie to actually work functionally. It was quite funny, and it's that same thing. Like, it's not a flowchart, it's just a list, but it's the same idea, and it's still, that's what I think of when I see something so convoluted.
The funny thing is, modern Capcom of today do have their finger on the pulse for stuff like that, so I wouldn't be surprised if they do come out and say it was inspired by something like that, you know?
Some sort of silly flowchart. It's such a random thing to have in there, but it's great. I love it.
And it's totally a Xeno thing to do as well, isn't it? You can just tell that he's a flowchart guy, isn't he?
Excellent. Well, thank you, Doom GC. Super call in. Our next call in comes in from friend of the show on Patreon, the Selfish Gene.
Hi guys, Gene here. I've been doing some reading about what a Requiem is, and it's a piece of music for the dead with very discrete, different movements, and that really fits the description of the alternating character thing that this game does. Someone smarter than me could probably map the game structure onto a famous musical Requiem. There's a lot that I didn't like. I just feel like I've had my spirit broken over successive games, and by this point, I'm just kind of okay with it. Like, I hated that Emily was unhurt all along, but we've had reverting BOWs since Steve and Veronica. I don't like when these games forget their setting. The high-tech Arc Lab installed before 1998. The games since Umbrella Chronicles have been quite bad for this. If this was all for the first time in a new title, it would be way too much for me. But as this game is in such a long procession, I'm kind of the opinion that, hey, at least we're getting new Resident Evil 30 years later. I didn't like the pandering to the audience, like Xeno taking Grace to the RPD only because it's an important location to the audience, not the story. It was too on the nose for me. I didn't like the main hall vamp, especially since that was a DLC, so there could even be players that don't recognise the music. It was member berries upon member berries at that point, and the game to me was way more interesting when it wasn't playing to the audience. Like, this game's not a remake, but it still feels too timid to entirely walk on new ground. The best thing about it is a new thing that it does, and that's having to sneak around in the lab. By the structure of the gameplay and narrative of the other games in the series, you're always quite empowered by the labs, whereas this unique Requiem structure opens up this gameplay possibility, which I absolutely loved. And I love that at least one character in this game solves some of their problems and outsmarts the baddie, just not by shooting at them. I'm a bit worried that Resident Evil is becoming the M. Night Shyamalan of games, where a big twist reveal towards the end is almost as much a part of the Resident Evil DNA as zombies and viruses. And this is fun for the time being, but for a series with a long-running and interesting narrative, I'm a bit worried when overarching plots are made disposable for the sake of shorter-term shock value. I hope they aspire to longer-term writing. I played this on the Switch too, and I had to borrow a console for a week and rush to finish before anything was spoiled to me. And I'll bring this up because the remake sold me a GameCube, Veronica sold me a PS2, Resident Evil 7 sold VR headset, and Resident Evil to me has this system seller pedigree, and it has since day one. But this is the first time since Veronica on Dreamcast where I haven't had a console for the newest release. I think RE9 is good, but is it a system seller? I'd love to hear your discussion.
Thank you, Gene. Not quite as positive, perhaps, as our earlier call-ins, and some really good points, I think, about the kind of member berries. It's something I raised in my opinion on Requiem. It was all very on the nose, a lot of it, and as I said, I was quite exhausted by the time Hunk turned up.
It doesn't bother me. I don't know why nostalgia bothers people so much. Like, just I'm not trying to pick a fight, Nick. I'm not trying to pick, or whatever. But what exactly is why is it a problem if there are callbacks to things that trigger like nostalgic synapses in your brain and stuff? Like, what's wrong with that? Why explain to me why it is such an issue sometimes?
Well, for Hunk especially, I just found it so egregious. So
that's fine. I can give you that because you could argue it is a shoehorned in cameo, but like the main hall theme kicking in or something like that. I don't.
No, that's okay. No, that's fine. It just felt. I think it was a lot to kind of take in with everything. Just seemed a little bit forced. You had the same Tyrant, the same super Tyrant, and then you're back at the orphanage, and then there's Spencer, and then Hunk, and I was like, oh my god! And
I must say, like when Gene said about when Gene did say like Xeno takes Grace to the RPG for reasons, there is actually no reason to take her there at all. He could have just brought a laptop with him.
Yeah, and it's literally like it's just because it's near the orphanage. They could have just camped outside the orphanage if that was the access way they wanted to get to Ark, or he could have just taken her straight to Ark. There is no reason that's definitely a justified complaint. I think
the Tyrant being in the game is also like it's kind of nonsense, but I think it's used less as a story point and more of to show you how far Leon's come. Like the last time he experienced a Tyrant in these locations, he couldn't even survive against it. Whereas this time he's literally dispatching it with an axe. I think it's to show his progression and his journey. But then you could argue the game already did a fairly good job of that anyway. It wasn't really necessary. Is it fan service? Yes, it totally is.
But then it was also the narrative that script went with it. It was like, when he released the Tyrant, he goes, "This is all I can spare." Is a direct callback to 7 minutes. 7 minutes as well. That on the nose. And then it was, the Nemesis comment at the end as well, and then Hunk going, basically saying, "I am Mr. Death," and it was like, you don't know who Hunk is. You've never met him, and
well, I mean, this was one of the wider issues I had with the game anyway, because I did find it supremely bizarre that they center a Spencer-based storyline around Leon.
Yeah, absolutely, I'd agree with that as well.
And not Chris or Jill. Like, it just it's bizarre. It would have been made far more narrative sense to have something to do with Birkin as the reason why they went back to Raccoon. Found out, like we said in an earlier podcast when we were speculating what the game could be about, like they found something to do with Birkin has survived under the surface. Like G's mutated and evolved and things like that.
What do we think about Gene's comment about Requiem not being, in his opinion, a system seller?
I think that's down to the eye of the beholder. I don't think that's a definable thing by any person. If you want to buy a new console to support a new series, then that's kind of up to you. I mean, I'm sad that it evidently didn't this time for him. I think
I would say the sales themselves speak for themselves on that front.
Yeah.
Alternatively, that this is the fastest selling title in the franchise. Whether or not that equates to system sales, I'm not sure.
It's one thing we haven't really talked about in hindsight now. We talked about it a lot in the run-up to it, but we haven't really talked about it in either of the previous two podcasts. And I suppose this does lean in. It's a good time to bring it up, because about Gene not feeling inspired to buy a new console for it. the marketing was bizarre. Like, there's no two ways about it. Like, I think everyone was hyped at the Summer Games Fest when they announced it.
Yep.
And then when everybody got to see that initial footage and everyone was excited by Grace, and then it just kind of plateaued, didn't it? For months and months and months, and it just didn't really happen. And then there was the Leon announcement, and that energized everybody again. But if Leon wasn't what you were after, then
it didn't. It deflated people, and there was lots of people worrying about the tonal shift and the concept shift. And it was really only in the last maybe 6 to 8 weeks that once the press started to get preview hands on that actually involved both characters and started talking positively, did things perk up. I mean, I'm in two minds about that, Sean, because conversely, at the same time, I can understand trying to market this without spoiling too much, and Capcom for the first time really didn't spoil anything in their marketing. Which,
even that final trailer, man.
Yeah,
didn't really show anything, did it?
And when you go back and look at those trailers, aside from a few hints of things, most of the footage happens in the first hour or so of the game. There's some the Renwood stuff. There's some stuff of Leon in the streets. There's a lot of the care center in the first hour, but it shows flashes of things that happen late in the game, but very little of it has any context. And it's flashes. It's not full scenes or massive clues. It doesn't give you any context. So yeah, it's kind of a tough one. I think the marketing was hard and a little bit over the place, but I think it was because Capcom were trying to keep their cards close to their chest, on this. So yeah, it's not an easy answer. I think it was kind of justified in some respects. I think the thing that they probably should have done maybe differently was try to showcase the difference of the two playing off against each other rather than just doing here's Grace and then here's Leon in marketing at first. I think they should have gone with here's Grace and here's a reintroduction to Grace and we're announcing Leon and show the dichotomy between the two gameplay styles in that reveal, because I think that would have allayed a lot of fears, because as I said, it took till the press kind of started to get their hands on it and started talking positively about that cathartic nature of the back and forth. It's hard. It's a hard road. I don't think marketing some things like this. They got very lucky with Village. I think Lady D did a lot of lifting for them, for example.
And that wasn't even planned, of course.
No, exactly. No. It was just they capitalized on it. They definitely capitalized it, but I don't think it was it was with intent. And whereas this time around, it was they sold very well on the original launch of it. But yeah, just once they reintroduced it, I think they needed to show that balance better. Personally.
The system seller question is an interesting one, because obviously this is the first title we've had that didn't support the PS4 in all these years. So there was an entire install base that got left behind with this one. Because people like, even you, Nick, for a while hung on, didn't you, with Remake? You held on as long as you could. And I think a lot of people were happy with that. But then with Requiem, you did have to make a choice. And did the marketing do enough to make you want to buy a new console, especially given the price they are now? We're only seeing console prices increase. We've never experienced this before in the entire video games industry, really, on this kind of level. It's unprecedented how much money these consoles are going up now. I think this is going to be, what Gene asks there is something that's going to become more and more apparent as these consoles start knocking on the door of £1,000.
Yeah.
Because if Resident Evil 10 comes out on the PlayStation 6 and the PlayStation 6 is $999 retail, that's going to be a lot of people that have to make a decision. It won't be, because they'll still be supporting the PS5 for another 10 years, won't they? But you know what I mean?
It's so funny to me. I'm going to go on a slightly diatribe sideways of this, but to me, the console thing is a bit of a moot point, because in this country, console prices have always varied. And for example, when the PS3 launched, it was $1,200 New Zealand dollars, and the PS5 now at the more basic versions is still not even that price. It's $800, $900. Wow. So for me, it seems still relatively. It's only the Pro that's like in that same ballpark.
This is just the New Zealand tax, Rob, that you have for living in the fucking best country in the world. Come on, you've got to give something in somewhere.
It's just that it's the opposite. It's the fact that they go, it's a small player base, and we can basically, if people want to pay it, they can pay through the nose for it.
I don't know whether our listeners know this, but like sometimes we've bailed Rob out by like buying him things from this country and shipping it over, and sometimes like we nearly fall off our chairs when he tells us how the price of like retail games and stuff in New Zealand. It is astronomical. Some of your collector's editions and stuff, aren't they?
Oh,
nearly twice the price in some cases.
Yeah, it is. It has been the case, and so I've said, "Oh, can somebody grab this for me and chuck the money across, ship it over to me?" That happened with the Steelbook for Requiem. It's like they just disappeared here, and it's just like the prices through the roof. Even now, the lenticular people still selling the PS5 lenticular version for like $20-$30 up over retail because they were just that limited here. It seems it's insane.
Thank you, Gene. Always provocative calls from down under. Much appreciated. Our next call-in comes in from new patron, Lun Apocalypse.
Resident Evil 9. What an amazing game. Other than Alyssa being done dirty and the lack of additional Outbreak characters, I don't have much to complain about. And a lot of what I like about it will probably be echoed by other players. So instead I want to focus on an area that's usually overlooked in video games. Music in Resident Evil is usually classical and orchestral, and I love that Requiem instead sets its identity with unnerving jazz and dark industrial themes, and I love the repeating motif. It's something I've wanted in the series ever since Resident Evil 6. The simple use of 4 notes across the story helps tie everything together despite when the genre shifts, and it's a pretty massive shift. In the beginning, I was surprised to hear this shrill saxophone after running into trouble as Grace. Her theming wouldn't sound out of place in something like the recent Alone in the Dark remake, and I'm just glad that Doom Jazz has finally made it to Resident Evil. It gives it a little Twin Peaks flair, which I know some of you on the Discord will appreciate. Also, I'm not counting the Spencer Mansion basement track in that. The fart trumpet does not count, as doom as it is. I love how Grace's side of the story moves in this acoustic direction, and then during the scene where Grace ascends the stairs after defeating the girl, and we're introduced to not Wesker, her theme evolves from this dreamy lone piano into the industrial mood of Leon's story that we had only tasted earlier, and I think it's a nice transition into his side of the narrative. Now look, I know what everyone is thinking. Leon's theming has Anderson verse written all over it. A lot of comparisons will have already been made, so I'm not going to go there. All I'll say is Anderson may have done it first, but Requiem has done it better. The pulsing synthetic soundtrack evokes pure violence of BOW warfare, and the tension is still there, but Capcom wants to make you feel like the guy who's been professionally dealing with BOWs for nearly 3 decades. It's a bold move, but it works. It feels like we're playing the killing machine that is Leon S. Kennedy. Now, to top it all off, we get 2 new save room tracks. Grace's is fantastic. The theme feels like a nice evolution of Resident Evil 7's safe room, the same way the Rhodes Hill Clinic is an evolution of the Bakehouse. But Leon's is unlike anything I've heard before in Resident Evil. Its sci-fi aesthetic lends this melancholy that doesn't make you feel safe. It makes you feel sorry. Leon's on borrowed time, and it feels like his final moments are going to be spent in the wasteland of Raccoon City. This track makes you feel that reality. It's a simple and effective save room theme that I rate up there with Resident Evil 3's Free From Fear. Now, if I had to pick a favorite track in Requiem, I think it would be tied between the heavy Hans Zimmer-like track that plays over the Titan web spinner fight and the remake of Resident Evil 2's front hall theme. The way those 3 chimes play as the camera cuts to the destroyed RPD before Leon was instant chills. The melancholy it adds to the scene can't be understated, and the electronic ambience conveys the history of this relic revisited in the modern age. Anyway, I'll quit harping about music and let everyone get back to the lore discussion, but I'd love to know what the podcast team thought of Requiem's soundtrack, and if there are any particular highlights among its songs. Thanks again to the Rep Squad and Discord mods for keeping the server spoiler-free through these trying times. You're all wonderful people, and have a good one.
Thank you so much, Lun Apocalypse. Don't distract us with your professionally worded review on the music. Well over the 2-minute time limit, but we'll forgive you.
Yeah, that was a great call-in. I love that. Yeah, thank you, Luna. It was probably something that, this is why the call-in episodes are so important, because it's probably something that we don't cover a lot.
No,
is the music. I did find like Requiem soundtrack throughout. I thought it was quite understated. It wasn't quite
Mm.
as sort of bombastic and orchestral as previous titles were, but it was a lot more subtle, and I really did love the synth stuff.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a proper name for the genre. I don't want to stumble on myself by getting it wrong to music aficionados and stuff, but I will just say, like, yeah, I pretty much agree with everything you say. I think it was wonderful. I did love the little tones that play when you see a zombie, when you turn the corner in the
I
care
loved
center and
it.
stuff. It was really, really cool, and so out of Resident Evil's comfort zone to do stuff like that, to the point where it really takes you aback the first few times it happens, because it's so unusual that this series is doing like music cues like that. But I loved it. I thought it was great. Really, really good.
You instantly thought you'd been spotted. It was you're
Yeah.
like, oh my god, and oh yeah, I absolutely love that part of the game.
Well, my other part of it, for me, that I mean, just talking about the understated thing as well, is that there's a really great choice of when to use the music and when to not to, that I really enjoyed in that game. There are bits where it just lets the silence exist as well as the music, because then the impact of those things like you guys are talking about, where you have these like little stings and flourishes, actually have land, because you've gone from just the diegetic sound of what's going on in the environment to like the impact. So I do like it, like, and you're walking around the Rhodes Hill area, sometimes you just hear weird creaking sounds and thumps, and occasionally Grace responds to those too somehow, like she kind of has a little startle or a jump, which I think really, really works for the soundscape as well, because the music has such more of an impact when it comes in. I'm going to make a comment. My reaction was very much, as was said about the Leon stuff, there's a heavy-handedness to the Anderson-esque soundtrack, I guess, to some levels, but I do agree that I think it functionally does better because they've thought about the theming around this, the experience of Leon, and like the more action oriented elements of his gameplay kind of lead into the sort of styling. And it also has these throwbacks. I feel there's a bit I heard just in that call too that reminded me of it. There's these throwbacks to very 80s action driven movie soundtracks, which were very synth heavy. And I don't think that's done without intent. So I really enjoyed those little flourishes too. And again, going back to Jean's comment as well, like I really did like having that chime appear as you walked into the RPD, because they still had that sample in the Remake 2 soundtrack, but it's definitely much more of a heavy throwback to the OG, because it's so iconic, that those first beats you hear when you walk through the door. And so I guess that's, again, I mean, yeah, you could say it's nostalgia bait, Nick, and I wouldn't disagree with you, but it works because it does a lot of heavy lifting. It thematically ties that area together so well, and to remix that theme, and it has this haunting atmosphere behind it. The drift of like the dust and ashes left behind kind of motif that kind of comes through with it. I think it's just like a haunted, empty building that once, meant a lot to basically people in the universe, but also people playing the game. So it does a lot of work, and I really do enjoy that track.
I agree. Requiem's one of my favourite soundtracks in recent times, just because I find since 7 that there's been a lot of subtlety, isn't there, with a lot of the soundtracks. That it's not been quite as obvious. I think 7 did it probably still the best in terms of the subtle or the lack of music at times, and I think that's got a great soundtrack when it kicks in, and it kicks in at some great times. 7 especially, I'm thinking of the ship moments. I think it really turns on, whereas this one, what I like about Requiem is that there was clear soundtrack throughout the game, and you got all these moments, and it was confident in what it was wanting to do, and it was making clear different areas and different moments with the sound. Even though I didn't particularly like the Raccoon City East Raccoon part, I thought the soundtrack was particularly tension filled, and that kind of something's not right. I know the Titan Spinner music's gone down very well in our Discord anyway. A lot of people have commented on that. That's one of their favourites. You can see why, but yeah. Overall, I think it's a real draw. I wish I was more musically literate to be able to comment on why. It reminded me, in a funny way, it's a little bit like Survivor. Survivor's all MIDI, isn't it? Or I think it's pretty. But you know what I mean? It's like, whereas RE2, 3 at the time were all these big kind of scores, and Survivor just comes along with some nasty, grungy sounding. You know what I mean? And it's
I know what you mean. Yeah,
I know it. Yeah,
MIDI,
so do I know.
but it was definitely produced at a lower quality level. Let's
awful.
say.
But if you listen to it,
they're doing the best with what they've got for what they needed to, and
Yeah.
it's a very different sounding
Nick, will you
soundtrack.
leave the work experience boys alone? You know, we're given a big task. Come on.
But you know what I mean? It's kind of like, it's just it takes that, it makes Survivor feel so different to the other
Yeah,
games, just
does.
because of that take. And I think Requiem does that very well. You know, we know the sounds of Raccoon City, if you want to call it that. We've played the games enough. We know what Uptown should sound like, and this is like, no, we're doing it our way, and it is that grungy, grimy sound, and I think it worked really well.
I will say as well, you know, I want to say, I just want to give him credit as well for such a well-produced call-in as well, with, you know, accompanied by music and everything amazing. The three tones, I talked about it last time. I mean, it moved me to emotions I didn't know were coming. And I just want to just touch upon the fact that GT mentioned in the previous episode, or the review episode, that he used the throwback sound pack thing that came with the deluxe edition. I've since given that a go, and I don't think it works at all. I think it's far better if you leave it switched off and just have the original game's music play over. It's too forced.
Which is hilarious, considering, like, I found when they put the soundtrack pack into Resident Evil 2, it worked better because I was used to that music. Because I think that Resident Evil 2 remake soundtrack is perhaps too understated in a lot of places.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
and so I really enjoyed that. But yeah, I'm somehow not surprised that this soundtrack is essentially worse off if you switch it out to an OG one that just doesn't suit the tone and feel of that. It's not a remake; it's an original.
It's like too much time has passed now for it to work effectively, especially when you're also talking about, you know, the remake OG issue. But, like, you know, the music is a nostalgic trigger, and when you're going through like the Resident Evil 2 remake streets to get to the RPD, but you're hearing OG music, it doesn't fire those things in your brain.
It's a bit of a disconnect.
Feels out of place. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a cognitive dissonance of like, here's a different visual of a game, but the OG soundtrack from another game that doesn't match. Yeah, they're totally understandable.
Thank you, Lun Apocalypse. That was a interesting call-in. Our next comes in from Eric Jackson from Watch Mojo. So let's play that.
Hey guys, Watch Mojo returns with another call. Resident Evil 9 was about what I expected. Not as brave or ambitious as it could have been, but delivering on that modern take we've grown to love. As a little baby scaredy cat, I loved how the game made me miss Leon's sections whenever I was Grace. What I don't love is that the game doesn't feel like it delivers on the premise of going back to Raccoon City. Now, all storytelling is about setups and payoffs. To have one without the other can leave us unsatisfied as viewers. And I feel like this game is plagued with storylines that don't go anywhere, and payoffs without any setups. Missed opportunities, as we say. From Hunk, the blood memory, the connections, I feel this game suffers from RE movie syndrome by having villains they are too afraid to have stick around. My biggest gripe is with going back to Raccoon City and doing so little with that setting. In my opinion, move the fence to the neighborhood of the RPD and have Leon collecting detonator parts by exploring all of the old locations and giving him and Sherry a lot more to talk about. Why bother with a nameless neighborhood 15 miles away? Now, I actually love Xeno, and because I haven't played the new Separate Ways, I didn't realize his connection to the new Wesker. I just thought he was some random guy who was a fanboy of Wesker and wanted to emulate him, and I thought it was funny, and I was down for it. Sad to see him go. Now, love him or hate him, what I really loved is that it felt like Capcom was willing to be brave and bold and go in a new direction, and even if he was Wesker, it wouldn't bother me because of the setup of the blood memory by this point. To wrap up with my wants for the future, yes, story things, characters, reunions, etc., but because replayability is one of my favorite things with RE, that and the campiness, I want Capcom to be brave enough to make a game where we can miss things, a la RE3 original. And lastly, we'll remember that in the early games, we never play through the canon events with the different scenarios. I think some grace may be extended to the canonicity of events as they play out in the modern games. Maybe. Thanks for all you do.
Thank you, Eric. Yeah, interesting. I agree that the blood memory thing, I think, is a leftover of probably a very different game. I found that a really odd thing to properly build up with the files, doing a really good job, and then it is basically dropped. And then introducing, Spencer and everything else, Elpis being completely unrelated to the blood memory.
Yeah.
It was really odd.
It would have made sense if the blood memory thing had some sort of natural in-game conclusion where Spencer had realized that this was a fallacy, that it was never going to work. And then that was, as part of this decision of the other bioweapon stuff is taken off, but now it's the genie's out of the bottle kind of concept, and then this kind of fail-safe concept with Elvis. But that's not approached either. And I think this comes back to what we've talked about before when I've said that Capcom has been, I want to say, risk averse of pigeonholing themselves a bit too much in these narratives, which is also why they don't push too much heavy on the dialogue of setting up much more emotional beats or doing more than they have to in the game, which also ties into the whole villain thing of not having a recurring villain and so forth. So it's a tough one, but I agree with all the points. I very much say that more dialogue, more of this, more explanation, more understanding. A great point about the East Raccoon stuff too, having it placed around the RPD would have justified having the RPD as a hub, maybe a hub area again, and another better reason for why Leon would be there. He was able to get to that area, and to get to the orphanage had been walled off because of there's a big giant chasm behind it. So maybe that was the reason why you'd wall it off. Very, very valid points.
There is. I've never. Again, it's one of those things that you appreciate these call-ins for, but the fact that the raccoon section is played so much for nostalgia, and yet they spend the majority in a section of the game that Leon never explored originally. So it has no connection or association with him as a character. It may as well just be a generic post-apocalyptic city anywhere in the world.
Perhaps they feared the backlash that if they had explored other areas of the game, it would have included the clock tower or something like that, and everyone would have been like, "No, why couldn't you put this in Nemesis?" Yeah. I think they could have done more. They could have actually included a little bit of Raccoon City from the Outbreak games, or a redone version of the university grounds, or maybe the Apple Inn. I suppose you get a bit of it's not the Apple Inn though, is it, in the game? It's something you only kind of go through a little bit, but
the lobby area.
Yeah, they could have. Yeah, they could have done that. It's a good point. I think it's a good point. Thank you so much, Eric. That's great. Our next call in comes in from Mark Clappam, one of our patrons.
Mark here. Resident Evil Requiem had me a bit worried at the start, because those initial set pieces are so short, and you're chopping between Grace and Leon, that I really worried the game wouldn't get into a rhythm. But of course it does, and the Rhodes Hill Chronic Care Centre is fantastic. Just a brilliant environment, wonderfully creepy, classic Resident Evil environment where you're opening it up by bit, and you have another big set piece in East Raccoon, which is more action oriented, not quite as good, but still some big moments. I really appreciated the game as a whole, built around those two sort of big environments with little moments of blockbuster action between. I really appreciated the sort of clever way it reused assets. I mean, let's face it, that's why Houndwolf Squad are there at the end. It's because they're assets that already exist. So, Capcom are getting a lot of blockbuster for their buck by reusing them. And as for the story, Resident Evil, the series, is a sort of Shaggy Dog story, which is always bolting things onto what's already there. There's no profit in saying no and, cutting off avenues. So it's always just adding and adding. And I appreciated the story in the way it sort of wrapped around the previous stories before. And as for Spencer's decision, well, what matters is what Grace thinks about it. She's the lead character. And for her, she interprets Spencer's decision as positive, and that allows her to be sort of more optimistic and get over her fears. So I think we have to see it through her point of view as the sort of protagonist of the game. And as such, I really appreciated it. Thank you for listening. Bye.
An interesting point, actually, isn't it? It's almost like old campfire stories, and I think that last point about Grace is quite on point. She considered it to be a redemption. We are looking at it armed with vast amounts of knowledge about his previous actions, But Grace wouldn't have considered that, and she would. I think that's a point we haven't really thought about.
But isn't that part by design? Like this is all well and good because she does have that lack of information. But if someone's manipulating you, that's because they have the power and control. Like it's putting her in a situation where that should be the conclusion she reaches, so that she releases it. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg scenario, really, when you think about it that way. Like yes. We take it from her perspective, definitely she sees it as like a positive redemption kind of understanding that he was putting this out into the world for reasons, but those reasons have already potentially been manipulated and she's not thinking about this or aware of it. So I appreciate the sentiment. I don't know if I agree, but that's fair because as I've said online, said to other people, I can't remember if we talked about this in the last episode, I can totally understand that people would see this from both perspectives, and right now neither are wrong, because there is no silver bullet conclusion as to what that actually is going to be until either a future game or DLC or whatever Capcom designs, or it will be left hanging. And inherently, this is one of the things that up until Requiem, and this bodes well for this call-in as well, is the fact that too many times we had these narratives that hadn't started to call back, and it is bloated. There is there's a degree of there's what happens in the narratives, but to actually start tying some things back in and actually closing some doors and tightening some things up is a good thing as far as I'm concerned, because it was just getting to a point where things were just being bolted on and it was getting unwieldy. Too many unfinished questions and unanswered endings, and so the tying things together a little bit here and there is always a good sign as far as I'm concerned. But
still adding things like RCS, and you're like, that's opening up a huge can of worms.
I mean, it doesn't. It only goes. This is the problem with a lot of it. It only goes as far as they want it to go. So if they come around and narratively say, oh well, it impacted this, but it didn't take away, say, Sherry's G symptoms. I'm trying to put those two things together. Sherry's G symptoms, then maybe that's what they decide because they've got narrative control. Like right now, we assume that's the case because it seems to take away Xeno's powers, but they can just write themselves into whatever corner they want or not. So I know that sounds like it's the same thing. It's bolting things on, but it also means that they can just change things on a whim. And inherently, as things have gone on, I become less of a stickler for the narrative consistencies of lore or anything, because I just expect that what will happen will happen. And so there's definitely some truth to like just bolting things on or adding things, or we've got an idea of something interesting. I mean, Resident Evil 6 is a perfect example of that. There's this idea of like an image of Leon and Chris pointing off at each other. How do we create a narrative around that concept that's going to end up with those two facing off like that? Oh, we'll make the story the way we do. It's like the same thing applies here. Someone came up with the idea of like, what, there's this thing with Spencer, and then built it out from there. Or they picked out a character and then said, we don't know how they designed this game narratively at first. What was the key point? Was Grace the starting point? Was Alyssa the starting point? Was Spencer the starting point? Was it we want to do something with Leon and Raccoon? Was Raccoon City the starting point? Like any of these things could have started the narrative point, and then it's after that it's just figuring out how those things are going to grow and connect as you create the characters. So who knows until they say otherwise. I think it's stuff that we'll get answers from somewhat in future content, including DLCs, but I don't expect every answer is going to be answered because historically that's not been the case.
The biggest thing that annoys me with the RCS thing is that the Capcom know damn well that the fans will scrutinise this as a concept so much, and all we do wonder now is all the characters that were in Raccoon potentially affected. No files in the game actually tell us the status of our characters. So is Claire dead? Is Jill dead? Are they going to die? Are they going to get Elpis in time? And I don't feel the DLC will cover all of these avenues. So we've got like a potential 5-6 year wait before we find out what happened to Jill. Is she succumbed to RCS?
Or Chris or Claire? Or
this is the problem when you introduce such a radical concept like this that affects so many people. If you're not prepared to go, to explore the idea of it fully, you just lead to frustration, and I think that's what we'll see from the fandom in the coming months. It will be, if the DLC doesn't answer questions that people want answering, then you are going to get some frustration and some pushback, because how relentless and insatiable these fans are. Look how they were through the entire Requiem promo and run up. That's one of the reasons why I think the leaks were so successful this time, is I think people were running out of patience and just started to look up shit. And if DLC doesn't give the fans the answers that I think they want, I think you're just going to see a repeat of those frustrations. One of the things that Rob just talked about there, to do with Sherry and whether she'll be cured, I do feel this is possibly a missed opportunity, and I would like to see the DLC explore this a little bit more. Is maybe Sherry wants to be normal. And like she will welcome Elpis, like you can like give her like the rogue arc from X-Men. Like this will actually be a character defining point for her. She will lose her healing powers, her cool healing things, but she will get to be human. Like something that she knows in herself will be just a normal person, and maybe she'll actually embrace it, and that'll be a cool concept to take a character in the future. But who knows?
Thank you, Mark. Excellent. Our next call in comes in from another patron, Pete Warbis.
Hi, Pete Warbis here. I very much enjoyed the continuation of Grace's slow, first-person, horror-based gameplay set up in Resi 7 and 8, although when it came to the cutscenes, I did find it initially slightly jarring that they cut to third-person. It was a crime against humanity that a VR version wasn't available at launch, as it would have rivaled Resi 7 for scares. I think Grace's sections at Rhodes Hill were some of the strongest gameplay-wise in the series. Don't hate me, but it did occur that Rhodes Hill would serve as a good template for a Resi 1 remake. The crafting system was an excellent evolution, replacing gunpowder with blood but adding limits to the amount of blood that you can harvest at any one go. It was an interesting idea to divide the adventure amongst asymmetrically equipped characters, which offered not only a difference in perspective of story and gameplay, but also an evolution of the zapping system from Resi 2 and Revelations 2. This idea had lots of potential, though it would have been nice to develop this with some optional puzzles that you have to start as Grace, continue as Leon, and finish as Grace, for example. I enjoyed Leon's less linear sections in East Raccoon City, and it was nice to revisit the RPD, though I wonder whether having Victor Gideon show up instead of the Tyrant might have been a better use of his character, and it was a shame he didn't have a more dominating presence in gameplay. He strikes me as someone who would both enjoy teasing you through a series of puzzle traps as he might enjoy chasing you down as a pursuer. As someone who decided not to release Elpis, I felt like the bad ending was actually really strong, killing off one of the old guard in a way that felt shocking but earned as Leon passed the torch to Grace, allowing the antagonists to survive and giving Grace motivation for retribution. As the credits rolled, I felt the loss of that character. Alas, having the choice so easily undoable gave it about as much weight as when you die in gameplay, i.e. not a lot. I also felt the return of Emily in the good ending undermined the loss that Grace felt mid-story, not to mention the slightly ludicrous idea of undoing her transformation. Though it was heartwarming to see Grace and Emily echo the mother-daughter dynamic of Alyssa and Grace. Overall, I thought it was a really great entry with some outstanding sections. Can't wait to see where they go with the DLC.
Thank you, Pete. Yeah, don't shoot the vitals and you'll be fine somehow.
We haven't really talked about it, but I mean, I do agree with all these people who are calling out the Emily thing. I mean, it is absolute nonsense. And I know,
Gene mentioned it earlier too.
And about the Steve transformation, he just returned to Hugh. But come on. I mean, you literally see these tubers and stuff emerge from Emily. How do you reverse? I know Elpis is supposed to be good, but come on.
Well, they show it as if she's just cocooned in this weird monster around her by the end of it. Like it
screams
weird.
to me as an 11th hour rewrite. That does.
Yeah.
God, there was a lot to unpack in that call, and for all good reasons. I wanted to say there's some stuff that we've heard from others that we didn't touch on. There's some stuff in there that I'd forgotten about, that I wanted to talk about, and I've forgotten about. So I'm just going to go through what I heard in there, and you guys jump in. The camera stuff, like I've heard a couple of people obviously already in these corners talking about it, and it seems like the majority of people went with the idea of following what Capcom prescribed in regards to like first person for Grace, third person for Leon, and it very much does feel designed for that. Obviously it's great that they've given options, and I think it's going to be interesting going forward if this becomes the status quo for the entire franchise, that we just give these options at all times. I mean, they may not. It will depend obviously on the type of game and what they see, but I honestly wouldn't be surprised if this becomes the standard. It is slightly jarring. I can understand that from some people's perspective as well, jumping from a first person to a third person when things happen that are character-driven cinematics, and or elements where you have to do a certain action that requires it to go to third person, because otherwise it would look weird in first person. Personally, I didn't have too much of a problem with that, but I can definitely appreciate that some people would. But I prefer cutscenes where I can actually see everyone like it's a cinematic. So in theory, I want to see it as if it was a cinema camera. The VR thing too, I think, was a bit of a missed opportunity. I think in some respects, because but I think I inherently understand it in that it's a double-edged sword. The PlayStation VR2 has probably not sold as well. I think the idea of having it in their required investment, because I believe, don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty certain that Sony invested into having VR in those games along with Capcom, so they as an encouragement.
They essentially funded them, didn't they?
They funded the development side of the VR, which obviously was a boon for them, especially for for 7. But I think maybe Sony just didn't have the budgetary requirements to throw this in, thinking that it was worth an investment. Had they done so, we probably would have seen it. That doesn't mean it won't happen eventually. Maybe it will. Maybe down the track, Capcom will realize that this is a good way to bolster some extra sales for Requiem. That the value of investing in it, that the game's already pretty much playable entirely in first person anyway, barring a couple of sections. So if they can crack the nut on how best to approach the motorcycle section, that would probably be it. Really, that's the only area that they'll have to figure out how that's going to look.
Yeah, I mean, I am gutted. Like I do mourn, like he does, that we're not going to be able to experience that first time in VR, because the Rhodes Hill section would have been, and for me as an arachnophobic, you can fuck your Titan spinner in VR. Thank you very much. I mean, I found it just about unbearable in first person. I could manage it in third pretty well. First person was a bit much. VR, I think I'd have had a heart attack. So all points I agree with.
Yeah, I agree. I think the change. I think the Switch works very well. I did the curated mode, or they want to call it. And another one of the call-ins earlier was talking about. I think it was Mark, about there is a lot of changes early on in the game, which that is a little bit. You only play as Grace for like 10 minutes or whatnot, and then you're Leon, and then back and forth. But it does. I was pleased that it took its time. Yeah. I think that was really good, and
I think it's a necessary evil because you kind of have to establish the characters and where they are each to get to them to the point. But once it's done, it's done.
Yeah.
The Victor stuff as well is a valid point. And going back to what Sean was saying about the Mr. X stalking you, and Victor stalking around East Raccoon would have also been a completely sensible option. Could you have imagined just like taunting Leon and continuing to be even if it was a case where it wasn't a direct confrontation all the time, but just kind of setting up traps and observing him and trying to take him out, from a distance would have even been something. So again, it could have been an interesting foil for that whole section, more so than what they ended up doing. But again, narratively, they throw him on it, as people have pointed out, the ridiculousness of him on a tiny little motorcycle firing RPGs at you while you're being attacked by giant mutant dogs.
There's been quite a lot of discussion about the motorcycle section on our Discord amongst other places, and the one that I cannot get rid of now in my head is, should that have just been Hunk on a motorbike? Hunk would have just looked fucking badass on a motorbike,
At least it would have built him up.
And it would have made total sense, narratively as well. I could imagine him in that kind of situation immediately.
The comment was about the ending. I'm in two minds. I get it, because obviously a lot of people did pick that ending first. And inherently, we call back to the idea that there are multiple endings in early games, and I kind of appreciate it for that level, but I don't think it undermines what that ending is any more than getting I think the difference inherent maybe with earlier versions where there was multiple endings was that you got that ending and that was the resolve. You made your choices, and if you wanted to get a different ending, you had to load an old save or replay from the start, whereas this time it's like, you get an option to just go back and make the choice all over again. And I can understand from that, it kind of underpins the decision. But when you pick that choice, it's not like other games don't do that. I remember, was it Batman Arkham City, where if you there's a section with Catwoman, you can just decide to not help Batman and leave, and so it starts playing the credits, and then all of a sudden it rewinds back to the choice, and I'm just
the best one is it Far Cry 4, which has a sit down with the big villain at the beginning of the game, and you can just choose to walk out the room, and it literally rolls credits.
No way!
Yes, it's the end of the game. You decide not to go into conflict, so therefore there is no conflict. Then the game's over.
Brilliant.
And then you get to choose again to actually play it properly. But which I love. I love moral choices like that, and inherently that's why I don't think I have the underpinning issues of it being like it undermines the ending. The ending is what that ending is, but it's clearly not supposed to be the true ending. So
I just see it as a massive Nakanishi troll. I think he knew what he was doing. I think he was being a bit of a cad, to be honest, when he made that.
And I love that. I love that fact. I think that's great. As far
I could
as
just
I'm
imagine him
concerned.
laughing heartily when he looks up those stats of the amount of people who chose to destroy Elpis
this time around. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you guys feel any different about the different endings, but I thought it was okay, and
I'm indifferent to it. I appreciate the troll of it, to be honest, because that's what I chose, and then the fact that the game immediately offered me to reverse it, I was like, "You bastard! You fucking knew I was going to choose that."
I mean, and I think I can see if people have got this vested idea that like, oh my god, they've actually killed Leon off, and like thinking this might actually be the ending too, especially if it's the first time round, and you sort of then find out that you've made the wrong choice. Here's the chance to go back and change your mind. Like, might feel a little bit slap in the face too, to be fair, and I'll give that much as well.
He mentions about how he wished there was like zapped puzzles and stuff like that. I agree. I think that would have been cool if there was certain rewards that you could, if you could set certain things up for Grace for then Leon to like finish or continue, that would have been really, really neat. The biggest disappointment I had with regards to the zapping, and I was really hoping they were going to do it, and I was disappointed when they did it, was the concept of Requiem being passed between them. So like Leon gives it to Grace, Grace gives it back. I would have just loved one more callback to that in the final fight. Like, say, for example, during the Nemesis battle, when Leon gets grabbed and he's in trouble, I would have just loved for Grace to have come round. He throws Requiem to her one last time and Grace gets to fire the last bullet of the game. Because I just think that would have concluded her narrative arc, if you like, in a really satisfying way. Like, she gets to do the final shot. And then Leon can do all the silly bollocks in the cutscene with the walking slowly RE3 for throwback Magnum shooting. That's fine, but the actual last gameplay shot would have been really, really neat if you went back into first person as Grace and you can just shoot Victor one more time with the last Requiem bullet or whatever, and then it leads into the ending as normal. Would have just been really, really neat, and one last final zap, which I think would have been satisfying for Grace.
Valid point for sure.
Thanks, Pete. Our next call-in comes in from Phillos 404.
Hello, this is Phillos 404 here. This is my first time calling in, so I would just like to thank the entire team for all the amazing work you do with the podcast and community you've built. Listening to all your discussions over the years has made my quest to go back and play all the games and experience all the RE media a shared journey, and immeasurably more fun for that. Now, RE Requiem. I have to say, I absolutely loved this game. I, like everyone else, was worried about the balancing act of the Grace and Leon gameplay and how this return to Raccoon City would see the old and new canon collide. In the end, though, the Grace gameplay is some of the series' best, where on my first playthrough, every zombie felt like a genuine threat as I held that one Requiem bullet close. Leon's gameplay was everything they have learned about over-the-shoulder gameplay, polished to a mirror shine. In terms of their emotional arcs, they hit home just right, with their gameplay and stories entwining and enhancing each other. Admittedly, the story is full of red herrings and twists and turns, but it occurs to me this fits perfectly with the director's previous offering in Revelations 1, so perhaps shouldn't be a surprise. That doesn't work for everyone, but for me it really did. The respect for the whole 30 years of RE is clear, weaving references into the plot and environments, but never in an obnoxious way that would ruin the experience for those who haven't played all the games. I think the distinction you made between a retcon and recontextualization is absolutely key. If we want to see the rich depths of the old lore continue to be utilized in stories going forwards, we need to have it react to and grow with the new plot beats. Requiem, for me, endorsed the original canon and showed a way forward beyond the remakes, where the original lore is respected, while bringing along those who only played the remakes with us. Ultimately, I would describe Requiem as a miraculously perfect balancing act between different gameplay styles, between the old lore and something new, and ultimately between the past and the future. Finally, some possible solutions to two plot controversies. Firstly, when Xeno is talking of Grace the RPD, when he is talking about copies of her, he is scrolling through pictures on subjects dated after Grace's birth, 2020 to 2005. The confusing part is then, without a beat, he brings up the video of pre-Grace clones. It is clumsy, but I think we can avoid the worry that Xeno thinks Grace is from the 80s program. Second point, I agree completely that narratively it is better if Grace is not special. One way to avoid her seeming T-virus immunity getting in the way of that is what if Spencer gave her a dose of Elpis as a child, along with other vaccinations. So in the end, she won't be any more special than anyone that ultimately gets a dose of it. Although I suppose, ironically, if Gideon had more time that night to examine her blood beyond IDing her, he may well have got Elpis from her blood anyway. So that's my thoughts. Thanks again.
But also a very positive review. Somebody very much enjoyed the gameplay and some interesting points from the canon. Something that we obviously mentioned in the last podcast about a couple of the retcons, loose ends, should we say. Is Grace, for example, infected? She's one of the only few people to be canonically bitten in the game, in a kind of cutscene. And as I think John mentioned last time, wading through infected blood and saying it's in my mouth, that kind of thing. And
the opposite thing is I got a good concept behind that. If that was the case, there's always
I actually agree.
Yeah.
And that date thing, I think we'd have to tell John about that date. if he's flicking through and it was dates after her birth date, that's quite an important point. You know, that's been a long-term concern, isn't it? Why does Xeno think she's a clone or the original copy when he has the information to say that the
project's even older than this? Yeah,
even older than that. And then if he's flicking through stuff that's dated 2000, whatever it needs to be, that it's clumsily then put together.
It's like he's picked this out just to show something that would have some weight behind it, where this girl is about to be attacked and looks like Emily, and and technically her. I still don't, as I said, I still can't get past the point that I think Grace would be self-aware enough to know that Emily and other girls look like her when she was young. If there's a connection, it's just a weird, that's a disconnect I just can't get past.
No,
because I think most people are self-aware enough to see if you saw someone that looked like you'd probably figure this out. But very, very valid point. I wanna point out. Last time I spent a large amount of time talking about retcons and recontextualization, which have, as I said, tried to explain, and I think I've done okay. It was two different things that this game does both of. But inherently, what I see in the bigger picture is that the fears that you guys have had in the past about the remakes in general, on top of this, have essentially become true in the community, because I think in the wider community, I can't say perhaps our Discord and so forth, but generally out in the public, the more discourse I see, especially after Requiem, is that people take that the remakes are canon versions only, and that the OGs are not, even though no official statement has yet been made by Capcom about any of this, and the context of some of the deeper dive parts into the game would tell you that they've definitely not made that decision, because there's contextual connections to multiple games that are both parts of the RE Engine era, but also not. So it's really tough to point out otherwise in general, and that makes everything look like retcons or just recontextualized to remake only, when that's not entirely true. And it's really hard to point to anyone and say that's the case. In fact, I had a guy literally swear at me on Facebook the other day for disagreeing with him that it was canon, that only remakes apply, and I was just like, yeah. And I pointed to all the same things that Nick, well and truly, I know well and truly as well, in regards to the statements made around RE2 in regards to the reimagining concept, and that you had Capcom producers saying they both exist at the same time, and they both exist, and it's tough. And so I don't know where this is going to go in the future. If this means more retcons, more recontextualization, or an inevitable official statement or position where something will take place in a game where you have to say that the remakes are the be-all end-all version now, because there's no way to go backwards. Obviously, pointing to stuff like the Robert Kendo thing in particular is pretty hard to miss, and the RPD obviously being the remake version. But as I've said before, it would be silly to go and make a RE9 version of the RPG that looked like the PS1 era version, because people would be like, but at the opposite end, because more people have played the remake than the OG. That's just simply true.
I think we'll get at some point Jill having PTSD, seeing another branch of Toy Uncle, and and we're gonna go again. It's something like that that's going to crop up. If that happens in, say, a CGI movie or something like that, I think that's when the writing is on the wall. I mean, we've always said with these things, it's always to do with intention, and a lot of times, there's been a little bit of disconnect between what fans think Capcom want versus what they think they want. This must mean this, and it's the prime example is the original game and remake. Whilst no one dismisses the original, far from it, the intention was clear from that game that it was replacing the original, at least from a storyline point of view. because it took everything and and added to it. And
Yeah.
you could argue, but for perhaps some of the changes with regards to Krauser, Remake 4 is the same sort of thing. It's kind of added to it with the Amber storyline and things like that, whilst it has kind of retconned other things. Anything in Raccoon City was always going to be more problematic just because there's so many things tied within it as well. Whereas you could do a Remake 5 and it wouldn't affect anything in theory because we haven't gone back to Kajuju. Same with the the village and the Pueblo.
The impact of RE5 wouldn't be remaking RE5. It'd be the stuff to do with Spencer now.
Exactly, yeah.
Right, and that's more DLC than it is the main game. So,
but even then, Nick, you talk about the remake of 1, but then you've got Revelations 2, which is a throwback to the original Barry. With Jill sandwich jokes and everything.
True, but it still works within the context.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wouldn't put it more of an Easter egg. It's like getting your knickers in a twist that Tofu appears in Requiem.
Which people have.
Yeah, it's like it's an Easter egg, same as Barry's kind of line, with.
But I'll just down to the appearance of Barry is more akin to his original appearance than the remake one.
Yeah, fair point. It's an ongoing discussion.
I just think we need to just all kneel at the church of Peter Fabiano. And just accept it's all canon, I'm afraid.
I think the biggest problem is, though, that RE2, as you've said, Sean, it felt like a Cliff Notes version of RE2, Remake 2. Whereas Remake 3 didn't. Whilst they missed stuff from the original game, it felt detailed, it felt aware. Whereas 2 was like, it felt quick. It was like, here's that bit, then that bit, then that bit, and
that to me is the only reason why also people who are playing Remake 2 shouldn't really ignore the OG thing, because barring a couple of things, there isn't really anything that should contextually make a huge change. Whereas 3 actually has a huge difference as compared to its OG, right? Like we've talked about this. Whereas 2, if it's a Cliff Notes version, then there's no reason for them most to not exist. And even the developers designed it with the idea that originally they were going to do the original game as verbatim with them, polished, and then decided, there's still the original there to play. It doesn't take it away.
This is what I find to be going to be a hilarious irony as we move into more remakes potentially. As if you believe all the rumors, then we've got Zero and Code Veronica remakes coming up, and I just don't feel they're going to resist the opportunity to seamlessly weave the Connections storyline into these titles, especially Zero, with Brandon Bailey being potentially a big part of the Marcus backstory now. He wasn't in the original Zero, but he's certainly got to be now because of RE5's very clever weaving around the diary dates and stuff like that, and putting Brandon Bailey in that position. They've made Brandon Bailey a big deal in the series moving forward. So now if you have like a Zero remake that features the Connections, you've got a Code Veronica remake that's going to deal with HCF and the Connections. Remake 2 is just going to feel like this weirdly unconnected title that just exists. And it was kind of like the springboard for the remake saga, but it's so unconnected to everything. I just going to find that ironically hilarious.
It's definitely ironic when you, as I've said before, when you take it into the context of what the OG RE2 was to OG RE1 and its design, when they had 1.5 and it was so disconnected, and then the feedback they got and the new writer that came in was like, you guys need to tie these things together somehow, so let's get some references to the mansion incident and what's happened, and let's get Chris in there, and let's get this, replace the character with someone who's related to Chris, and actually started to connect that game to the first game to try and bring that narrative connection across. And yet Resident Evil 2 Remake essentially goes back and ignores all that and basically barely mentions any of that stuff. Becomes very self-contained. And then you've got all these games moving forwards. I mean, I've seen people clamoring. We're going on so long about this, but it's so important. I've seen people clamoring on about, they're like, more remakes. Oh, Resident Evil 5 is going to get a remake. Resident Evil 6 is going to get a remake. It's just like, oh, Jesus Christ. Again, you can't... I mean, in an ideal world, yeah, sure, they can remake everything that they want to, but at which point do you just go, what's the point? What is the point? 5 remake at this point is just pointless.
I just want to remind all our listeners that we called all this out back in 2015. There's probably an episode, someone could give me the number, where we literally said this was going to be a reality in the years to come, and we're here.
Yep.
You know, is this really what people want? I don't know. We're going to go to another call in very
We
soon
are.
because we don't want to just sidetrack to another remake original debate again. But, you know, is this really what people want? Nick, cue the tape.
Yeah, let's find out what let's find out what Ploppy 54 wants. I don't think it's as popular as that.
Hi, Ploppy 54 here. There's a line from Resident Evil 2 that I think fits perfectly.
You couldn't possibly understand what's happened. Those monsters from Umbrella have destroyed my beautiful town.
See, when I finished Requiem, I know exactly how he feels. The first half is really good. I really enjoyed the first half and Grace's section. The direction, the atmosphere, Grace's sections, although it does rely heavily on the stalker mechanic, I generally enjoyed it. But then you reach Raccoon City and the wheels come off. Not because it's badly made, because of what it quietly decides. The RPD is the remakes version, which obviously I don't quite like anyway, and now there's no way of you just kind of ignoring the little differences. Leon's flashbacks are lifted from the remakes cutscene, and so Capcom's never announced that the original timeline was over. They've just built the game inside the remake world and left the rest of us to figure out what that means. And then what they do with the canon as well. I mean, Raccoon City is no longer a small Midwestern town. It's a super metropolis. How on earth was RPD supposed to cover that entire city? Xeno is Wesker's shadow in a new body with one line's worth of explanation. Punk shows up for a boss fight. He must be in his 60s by now. Still doing the same job? Still in the same place? Mr. X is back for recognition rather than terror. Ada Wong, the most important person in Leon's history, isn't even there. Isn't even mentioned. In a game that's drowning and dripping with fan service, the most telling thing is the fan service that's missing. But the worst is Spencer. Now, I've listened to your lore chat, and yeah, I kind of get where you're coming from with him still trying to control the narrative. But are we not going down headcanon route down there? Because that's not the story what we was told. We was told that the man who wanted to become God apparently had a change of heart on his deathbed and created the antivirus. I mean, if that is true, then Resident Evil 5 is a different story than the one we were told. On the surface, it just looks like they've retconned a founding villain. The first half remembers what Resident Evil is, the second half just raids it.
I promise to all our listeners we've not listened to these in advance and literally just leading into the next the next call in perfectly.
I'm not going to believe you. Go on.
I'm going to start. Like I, as I've said, I don't think inherently there's a right or wrong reason to the whole Spencer thing, because I think there's readings into it depending on how you look. So if you look at Resident Evil 5, you look at the DLC, you look at how Spencer's presented, it doesn't line up. So that's where I guess it's not per se headcanon, it's based on previous existing canon, or at least description. So it leaves us with this weird choice of do we fully believe in what is being presented in the game as gospel, or is it a manipulation because Spencer's otherwise portrayal doesn't line up? And I think that's where it comes into. We're examining it as an idea, but if we continue down that path, then yes, definitely that is headcanon to say that is truth. And I'm definitely not at that place. And I don't think John was either. It's a potential, because it feels like it would be very much in his best interest to do it that way. It would be in character for him, but that doesn't belie the fact that all of a sudden it could actually be true and he actually has a change of heart and does this all for the right reasons. But personally, I'm leaning the other way. That's it. I can't not just justify that way.
The thing, I do hear what the headcanon thing, but I would also say there are facts that also confirm the fact that the change of heart thing isn't entirely true, because he's still asking for test subjects. He's still doing horrific tests. After this interview with Alyssa, you know, he's still driven towards finding this cure for his aging disease, the disease of aging, and he's still.
For now, this is my concern, because you're comparing it to RE5, and should that get a remake, I think it can recontextualize everything.
I just wanted it to be on record. Nick, you just brought up the remake issue again. It wasn't me this time.
I know.
Okay. But no, I mean, this is the problem, isn't it? If we ever get these games, then we're going to have to reconvene and do all this shit all over again. Isn't it great? What a future we're looking forward to, eh? I called this out, and you all wanted it. You all wanted it.
No, I didn't.
No, I was the only one speaking positively of that episode, I believe. Just saying, guys, it won't be that bad. It'll be okay.
Yeah.
It'll be okay. But I think inherently ultimately what this is going to come back to is that I know, and I think this has already been a discussion, so I don't think it's a spoiler to say this, but I think, and it's spoiler for us as a podcast to say this, I mean, to say that I think we will definitely have to have a sit-down conversation with all of us on to talk about the future of the franchise in regards to like what that means between canon and non-canon, between what is going to be remade, not remade, because it's such a huge topic. And I think we, as we've already proven in the last 15 minutes, could easily sit here debating all this for quite comfortably for quite some time.
Yeah, when we've drafted out the future of the podcast episodes, because we always reconvene and put together a plan. We have talked about we're going to have to do a sequel to the remake issue, even though we swore it was the last word on the remake issue.
I think if I recall correctly, when RE2 remake was announced, I think we agreed that the only thing they could possibly add to the RPD without conflicting was like an extra shed at the back. We said, because I think John was talking, well, they could make it bigger. So they can't. It's going to mess with Outbreak. It's like, chuck a shed and we're done. And we're good. Going to mess it all up.
And how is that shed now, Nick? How is it?
It's a bloody orphanage. And
this too.
Oh, don't. Thanks, Ploppy.
So this is your fault, Nick, is what you're basically saying. Is Capcom ran with that idea and they crafted an entire fucking narrative around this shed at the back of the RPD.
Why did they listen to Nick and not my hats on all enemies idea? That would have been much better.
Brilliant. Right, our next call in comes in from Jonathan Stark.
Hello, Resident Evil podcast team. I wanted to share my thoughts on Resident Evil Requiem on a very specific thing. It highlights how influential Resident Evil has been on two different genres, the survival horror genre and the action genre, but also the difficulty that creates for Resident Evil. And that difficulty is that it now has huge fan bases in both genres. And so how do you continue to appeal to both? Do you keep making games like Requiem where it's, some percentage of straight horror and some percentage of straight action? Or do you release one game that's straight horror and one game that's straight action? It really raised that question of, for me, which like no other series seems to have this particular problem of two almost at odds genres that it has to appeal to, and fans of those genres are equally fervent. Personally, I feel that the horror in Resident Evil 9 was done amazingly well, like top of its game, a build on everything that worked in Resident Evil 7 and 8. In terms of action, it feels like it still has a ways to go, honestly. I got a little bit tired myself by the end of the game. There was, I enjoyed the Leon sections as a break from the horror, but then they just kept going. And you really start to see the cracks in their system, their action side of the system, once you're fighting the sort of umbrella soldiers. That's not a great portion of the game, I think. So yes, I would love to hear your thoughts on where the series goes next in terms of handling both genres.
I know Nick didn't like the soldiers for sure. That was
Nick did not like the soldiers. That was terrible. Thank you, Jonathan, for bringing it back to
Nick also just talked about himself in the third person there, everyone. So I heartily apologise for that.
Oh no, that is honestly a shocking section of the game.
Anyway, it's so brief, Nick. Honestly, one grenade and it's sorted.
Brief for you, hour and God knows what for me. It bloody wasn't. Anyway.
I'm pleased, thank you, Jonathan. I'm pleased this question was asked. I personally, and I don't know where everybody sits on this, I don't want to see them do this again. I don't want to see a hybrid game again. Not for a while. Save it for like a milestone game or something like that. I think it works. Even though Nakanishi and people on the team said that this was just purely accidental that this game fell on the 30th anniversary, I think it's the perfect 30th anniversary game because of the way it blends two very different sides of the RE coin, if you will. I don't want to see this happen every single game because I think this as a concept would also get stale. He even talks about the fact that by the end of his playthrough, he was already getting tired of it. So I would say let's leave it. Now it's been a cool experiment. We've talked about, we've had many call-ins which said like that, the care center section is absolutely incredible. Leon's section's still good, but not, so at risk of like not beating this horse into oblivion, have maybe like another little reset. we're due another little reset, aren't we? Because
Mm.
we've completed a first-person, if you will, trilogy. We've had our fixed camera, we've had our over-the-shoulder, and now we've concluded the first-person trilogy. So let RE10 be its own thing. Don't let it be a slave to the fact that it has to be this and it has to be this. This has been what I feel is an excellent conclusion to all chapters, if you will, of Resident Evil up to this point. Let RE10 do a new thing. I'm not saying it needs to be like a massive lore reset like Resident Evil 7 or 4 was, but certainly don't feel that they have to do this again. This mixed branching zapping narrative with two entirely different play styles. They struck lightning once. I'm happy to leave it at that.
I'd agree.
It's unsustainable to continue pushing these out, but then the question isn't inherently doing this again per se, but what do you do going forward? And the answer is going to be very challenging for Capcom, because it was already very challenging to come to this conclusion eventually and risk it. It was risky, let's be honest. It was risky to do it, and it succeeded. Great, but I've said it before, this franchise does have very different fan bases and different gameplay styles, and it's hard to cater to all of them. And so moving forward from this, if it was me, I'd be like, cool, I want more pure horror. Some more of that would be great. If it was another zombie title, I'm down with that. I was already wanting more. And I think Sean was the same when the RE2 remake came out. I was like, I'll have an original game with that gameplay. I'm happy with that. That was fine by me, but that's not something that's fully happened. This has elements of that, don't get me wrong, but it's not obviously be all end all. So if they take the Requiem Graces section stuff and made a game around that, I'd be more than happy. But will everyone be happy? I'm not sure. There's definitely fan bases for the remake 4 and Leon action stuff out there who probably want more action, fun, chaos gameplay. It's going to be very telling also, I think, what the next remakes end up being. 0 has to be that creepy, slow, zombie-filled, monster-filled game, I think. Code Veronica could definitely lean more action-heavy if they wanted to, and probably will, even though the OG is a bit of I wouldn't say it's massively action-heavy, but it's definitely a heavier action game than, it was a progressive change. 2 was more action-heavy than 1. Code Veronica was more action heavy than 2 per se, so don't think there's a silver bullet answer to that. It'll be whatever Capcom decides. I think Sean's comment about maybe doing something different again might be also an option that's fully an option. You also have to make the decision between, is it one narrative with one character? Is it 2 characters but their gameplay styles don't interchange differently like they did with Requiem? They play the same. It's more like a Revelations 2 kind of thing. Is it, what options? Endless. None of them are right, none of them are wrong. I think it's all going to depend on the feedback to this game, and if I take that on board, I think we're going to see more like the Care Center and Graces section, because I think people appreciated that a lot more in the comments. If that's the same feedback that Capcom gets, then I think maybe we'll see more of that first. That's just my take.
Thanks, Jonathan. Next call in comes in from Bragenitor.
Hey, Rep Boys and the Discord. If I'm talking fast, it's for the 2 minutes. I'm not mad. I am playing with fire, and I enjoy all of the games, including Requiem. New title, new chapter, not another remake, not some dead-end branch of characters that go nowhere like the Winters family. Finally, something new. Like old characters, Leon, Rebecca, an Outbreak character. Somehow Spencer returned, and so did Wolfhound Squad, and Chris, off screen. They go to old locations and face off against old monsters, tying into old backstory. Requiem feels like seeing your favourite band live. Old songs performed live, so a little different, and maybe a few new tracks. So for the bold new direction of Resident Evil, it's 1 step forward, 1 step back, and, in the end, a cha-cha real smooth. But yes, the new stuff. Grace, Emily, Gideon, Ark, great additions. But am I the only one who wants a story that actually resolves itself? Who is Xeno? Who has RCS? What can help us cure? Where did those immortal child monsters in Raccoon City go? You talked for 3 hours, and a lot of it was questions, and I don't consider these cliffhangers. So were Blue Umbrella BOW soldiers. That sure paid off. I don't want to wait for RE10. It shouldn't be DLC. I'm paying for a story, so give me expansions, but not the resolution. Other than that, I love the Mobag chase.
It's interesting point, yes, it mentions the fact that we spoke probably far too long, but they're right, they're not cliffhangers, they're just plot points. It's a little bit different that, as you said, they're probably not going to be resolved quickly. if at all.
Well, this is par for the course, though.
Yeah.
I mean, inherently, we go back to Resident Evil 4, 5, 6. Requiem is no different in this regard. Revelations in 1 and 2 are the same. Like, there are always unanswered questions, and this was my bugbear before Requiem came out, and it's going to continue to be that because Capcom continue, from a writing standpoint, continue to play it reasonably safe and self-contained.
Yeah.
That it doesn't answer a lot of ongoing questions and potentially normally only adds more by the end, even if there are answers to some of them in the game narratively. And this is the thing about serialized storytelling, is that it needs a bigger roadmap of figuring out where things are going, but that's not how game development works. It's a lot harder to chuck those narratives down because things constantly change. I mean, this game went through several revisions, different characters, different narratives, different gameplay styles, and so I think it's in the end it's one of those things of like trying to put together something. I mean, different game developers and if you have I want to say an auteur kind of style, like if you want a Hideo Kojima kind of style, he can wrangle in those elements that he wants because he's in control of those narratives consistently. But the Resident Evil series has not been that. It's had different writers, different producers, different directors, different creators working on it. And so while you have an overview of certain producers that last a period of time or certain writers that may come back at moments, it's kind of open to interpretation too, which makes this a lot harder to pin down into a consistent narrative. And so I accept that, but I share the frustration constantly that we don't get resolutions to things that should be either explained in the game they're in or very shortly after.
Yeah.
And then the narrative starts to spin its wheels a bit.
It's a double-edged sword for me because on the one hand, like I too share the frustrations, and I spoke about CS stuff earlier. I don't think things like that should be left open-ended. But at the same time, and this is the double-edged nature of it, I love the fact that we're still talking about this game.
Yeah.
2 months later, these ideas are still being widely discussed. Even if we don't reach any kind of logical conclusions by the end of a discussion, the fact that the discussion takes place is still, of merit to me versus,
nothing.
Versus nothing. Like a remake, and I'm not getting into this again, I'm sorry, but like a remake offers very little in the way of post-game discussion because you already know where the story's going to go from that point on. Unless there's been some invented lore in that remake, like the Amber in Remake 4 or the post-credit scene in Remake 3, which shows the unseen character reaching for the vial, the broken vial of the antivirus, that kind of thing. But even those discussion points can only go so far because you ultimately have nothing until the next remake title sort of comes along. At least we are chewing the fat on advancing story now.
Yeah.
And I do think there is some merit to that, even if it's so stretched and forced. I said in the last couple of podcasts, I'm not a big fan of Xeno. I don't particularly appreciate what they've done there as much as I found him fine as a character in the game. I don't know whether the series necessarily benefits from him being in it, but at least it's a discussion point. At least we're talking about something.
Yeah.
I think the thing that I take away from it is that from a development standpoint, narratively, I think that I would like to see the team review this in a way that they need to answer as many questions as they put forth by the end, because too many of these games don't do that. That's the problem. They don't answer enough of previous questions and then create several dozen new ones that are much more pressing. So a better balance of being able to resolve stuff in its own singular narrative and within the continuing narrative would be good, so that it feels like there's always reasons to continue those conversations and to continue looking forward to new games, but you at least feel like there's some catharsis and resolve to a lot of the outstanding issues too.
I do think it is borderline unforgivable that they finished Village on the cliffhanger they have, and they haven't even dared to address it at all. And that the Hound Wolf squad are just in RE9 like nothing's happened.
And Chris gets name dropped a couple of times as if it's no big deal. And BSAA is still continuing on, and we get some hints towards some infighting going on, and that's it. I totally agree.
But Village's ending made you think that, Chris was storming the European headquarters, didn't he? And it was going to be...
Yeah. let's
big
be
compensation.
let's be honest though. This harkens back to how many times did we say we need to take down Umbrella before Resident Evil 4?
Yeah,
you know, the same thing continues.
It is a fundamental, it's a problem with this series that has existed since day one, basically. Well, no, not since day one, since the day Mikami decided to do what he did with RE4.
Particularly, but even before then, like there was a stretched narrative of like only so far you could go with Umbrella before they didn't give an answer or a conclusion. So even before that, I would say by the time you got to Code Veronica ending with, Chris going, it was time to take down Umbrella, and narratively in universe, it's only been a few months. You're kind of like, okay, that kind of still plays because, it's a few months. But then we get no resolve to that, except for that decision. They could have made a game in between that they chose not to. They chose to make a remake, and then they went straight into Resident Evil 4, and that narrative vision changed so many times that they didn't know where it was going, and then he made that choice. It's a bit of a rough ride. This is what I mean when game development sometimes overrides narrative choice.
The funny thing is that all the issues that everybody has of Requiem, I still put down to the fact that we are still feeling the course correct from Resident Evil 4. Like for a game that tried so desperately to escape the Umbrella thing, the fact that we're still circling around the Umbrella thing 30 years later
in Raccoon City.
It just shows that we are still feeling the effects of that game did. That the series was not ready to abandon the storyline in favor of something completely different, because all it feels like Capcom have done is have to apologize for that.
Well, inherently, that tour started straight away in Resident Evil 5, right? Like straight away, we were trying to bring back the narrative of Umbrella and Umbrella Chronicles and all that sort of stuff. Like it's starting to bring those straight back, and it's just something that because there were so many unanswered questions and narrative threads and interest in that, they've never been able to escape. But also part of that was just how iconic the idea of having Raccoon City and the events in that were as well, of kind of tied back into that. We always have to come back to either feeling like it's a reference to, repeating thereof, or in this case literally returning to. It's a hard narrative to resolve. I mean, there are other ones I'm just like that are, to me, like, Village definitely. Revelations 2, like, where's that going? Alex Wesker, like, that is another big one to me. Like,
nowhere.
It's gone nowhere, exactly. But that you can't just leave that one unresolved. That's friggin' huge. Because that also really potentially ties in again to Spencer and Wesker and like these things, especially with Requiem and this again, blood memories passed on, memory transfer. This is all relevant. I don't see why that didn't connect in again to Requiem quite directly. Even a reference of the fact that Spencer had set up Alex Wesker as another potential option to resolve his options for research. Like, it's just crazy. Like, perfect opportunity in this, and nothing's mentioned. So there was the comments earlier about what we've talked about it. No comments on Claire, nothing about Ada, even though there's some clear importance there to Raccoon City. Like, there are things where you're just like, maybe you're trying to not overcomplicate this, but I think like narratively it would have made more sense if there were some references to these things, even if it was just conversation, because contextually it would make sense, and some things on the inverse that you could not bring up and not need to be there. So,
and most importantly, is Ark still flying the helicopter? That's what we're dying to know. Right. Next,
he's friends with Leon.
He can keep flying as long as he has fuel.
Yeah, absolutely.
Leon's going, my buddy Ark Thompson, I finally landed last week.
Next calling comes in from Mr. Fancy Pockets.
Hello, this is Mr. Fancy Pockets, and I got obsessed with Resident Evil Requiem, more so than with any other games in the franchise. Why that was, I'm not sure, but its arrival has a weight to it that I hadn't felt since RE7. It has ideas of its own that move the classic formula forward and presents a story with relatable and likable characters that tries to tie together 30 years of lore, all the while taking something from every era of Resident Evil. It's a celebration as much as its own thing. The section in the Chronic Care Center was nearly perfect. Actually, I think it is among the best examples of the classic formula of Resident Evil gameplay. Here, I'll just say that I was shocked when I learned that I would need to use blood to craft ink ribbons. Really, that was a move of genius. I have to confess that I was pretty disappointed that the only iconic RC location in the game was the RPD. In a way, that shows how lackluster the RE3 remake was. It was that game's job to make the streets and the locations of Raccoon City memorable for a new generation. Still, I think they did very little with Raccoon City. They could have brought some location from Outbreak or something like that. You know, make their return to Raccoon City memorable. On that note, I also wish they had brought back hunters. They are already implemented in the RE engine, they're awesome, and they would have helped with the enemy variety. To finish, what really sold me on the game was the ending. I watched the last cutscene with Spencer and understood that Elpis couldn't be something bad, right? But I also couldn't release it. It cannot be a good idea to release something in the RE universe. I was torn by that indecision there, but I ended up releasing Elpis and felt proud about getting it right. What I love about the ending is how misguided the villains were, especially Xeno. In their pursuit for power, they tortured, experimented on, and killed hundreds of little girls, just to be able to get their hands on Elpis without having the slightest idea of what it really was. The ending is on a note of hope, but for me, there is also an undertone of senseless tragedy there.
Thank you, Mr. Fancy Pockets. Positive, very positive. Very much enjoyed it. Again, repeating a lot what everyone has said in terms of the Chronic Care Centre being a particular highlight and liking the ending. Very proud. Well done for getting the correct ending. I didn't think about it enough. I don't because I got it wrong, but never mind.
I think inherently the this is part of why the whole choice decision is perhaps also one of the reasons why some people feel very strongly about an idea of Spencer's redemption, because of the understanding they've gone through to understand that process themselves. And I kind of the pessimist in me goes, well, that's manipulative on the sense of the game developers, like Sean was saying before, that there's a bit of trolling with the other ending, and that you essentially are playing as Grace, so you are being manipulated the same way if Spencer is being dishonest. And people probably don't want to have that feeling or that understanding of that. They want to be optimistic about the ending and that Grace's growth is earned and genuine. And again, I can't deny that, again, especially if they do end up deciding that Spencer's redemption is accurate and true. So it's interesting to hear that, because I think that's a really valid point about it too, because it's not something that, until I heard that, I've been conscious of the fact that obviously people have got to make a decision and understand it, but maybe not really thinking about it from those perspectives, that you are supposed to share in Grace's perspective, whatever that is, and what your choice is based on the experiences through the game. So maybe it's not necessarily a direct troll, although I think it still is, but maybe it's more about like having you actually narratively think, which games don't do enough, to be honest. And so for you to actually have to make essentially moral choices in games tend to be very binary, and this still technically is, because you get a choice of release Elpis or not, destroy it or release it. But the difference here, I think, is that there's been a narrative weight of it leading up to that point that allows you to actually make that both these have a weighted consequence to the decision making, whereas a lot of moral systems in games don't tend to be. They tend to be like, you're either good or you're evil, and you act good or you act evil, and you get points on the good side or the evil side. Like there's not a huge amount of grey or variety. And so I think I very much appreciate the choice from that perspective too.
See, the funny thing was like I just don't feel I must have read the files properly, or felt that the game was pushing me in the way it should have been doing, because like destroy Elpis felt like honestly, when I clicked that button, guys, I felt like I was doing the right thing. And I don't know, I sat a bit, as much as I said I appreciate the troll, I did also sit thinking, did I do that wrong? And I had the same thing in Revelations 2 when I chose not to pick up the gun for Moira, because I felt for the character that's what she would want, to not pick up the gun. They've got to find a different way, because you're told through the game that Moira's trauma through firearms, and all this. So not picking up the gun to me felt like the right decision. It put me on the bad ending path, and I felt like Resident Evil fucked me over again. because at no point did I feel like maybe I just wasn't paying attention enough. I don't know, which is surprising for me, because I do deep dive in this lore and I absorb it all, and I really do think about what I'm reading. It's not just a surface for me. I take it all in. This is a lore-based podcast. I'm not joking when I say it, but I don't know, when the final choice came, I sat there, I pondered it, and I thought, Now we're going to destroy this.
This is like burying the rope all over again.
Yeah.
This is the interesting thing, though. Like, so what's the bigger question there, though? What was the narrative crux in your mind? Like, it basically comes down: do you trust Spencer or not? Essentially, is what the choice is, right?
I wasn't thinking of that though.
I was letting the characters lead me, Rob, because Leon and Grace, just before they go into the Grand Chamber, Leon basically says to Grace, we got to destroy Opus. So I'm letting him lead me. Leon's my man. He's holding my hand through this.
But then
I can't fight monsters like Leon can. He's telling me what to do, Rob.
But then Leon doesn't have the context that Grace gets in the game. Grace's access to those files is predominantly files are predominantly in Grace's part. Leon's not a file collecting machine per se, and so inherently it makes sense from his experiences that he would lean towards we've got to destroy it because he thinks it's another bioweb.
Yeah,
and so I remember thinking about this narratively, looking at the files, thinking about what Spencer's trying to do. Whether or not I believed he was manipulating or not doesn't make any difference. It's whether or not I believed that there was something either honest to it or whether or not there was something more to it. But it made me go, I think I'm going to release it because I don't think it's what they think it is. I saw the double reversal concept. I was like, these guys are so hard bitten on like wanting this thing, and I don't think it's what they think it is. And so I went with that choice.
This discussion makes me wish they could find a way for endings to work and be carried into a future title, because I think that would have been a really cool concept. We need to Life is Strange this up.
They did this in the Force Unleashed, though, didn't they?
Yeah.
If you did the bad ending in Force Unleashed, there's a whole blooming DLC where you took over the original trilogy of Starkiller,
and killed everyone.
Kill everyone,
or turned Luke to the dark side, and then did you still kill him in the end?
Because
you turned to the dark side and then kill him.
Yeah,
I don't think anybody is necessarily wrong with the destroy option. The game tells us it's wrong, but is it really that wrong?
No,
it's right from the point of view that Opus cures the RC problem and all that. But it's an interesting one.
The also inherent irony is if we are correct about Spencer being manipulative, then the destroy option is not what he wanted. So inherently, that also is like a choice that isn't right or wrong. It's just a choice, but it has its own consequences. Because while it's not the thing that Xeno and Gideon are looking for, it means that there's still other options out there for them because of the way, well, not for Xeno, but inherently, or Gideon, because essentially he doesn't turn back up. But the idea that there are still bioweapons out there now that are not going to be cured, and the RCS is still going to kill a bunch of people because the Alphas wasn't released. So it has its own set of consequences. Yeah, it would be interesting to see those two narratives play out. But yeah, I think they went with the cleaner, tidier ending in the end. Sorry, Nick, I've completely derailed this after this.
No, it's fine. It's all good.
Such an interesting point of discussion is like in regards to like what people think about why they made those choices.
Thank you.
Play the next one.
Yeah, I will. We're on to Yoke. Here we go.
Oh no.
Hey everyone, Yoke here. So I mostly liked RE9, but the game did start to drag down for me when I got to Raccoon City. We had such unique enemies in the care center, and then we just get stuck with generic zombies for the rest of the game. I feel that was a huge letdown. I also felt nothing during the Raccoon City and the RPD parts. I was not sad at all. I feel like it would have been way better if it was Jill instead of Leon, and just because Star's Tyrant paid me $5, Sherry's there as well. But I think it would have been really cool for them to talk about the city before the outbreak happened, especially since they gave us new locations we've never been to. Like, how cool would it have been to hear Jill say something like, oh yeah, this is where me and Joseph went drinking one time. Or Sherry remembering going places with maybe her parents, like the one time they weren't being shitty. As for my ranking, the DLC will change it, but currently I feel like it's a 6 out of 10 for me. By the way, I do feel validated about my love for Umbrella Corps, so I'm glad that it's being mentioned again. Now I do have a question for everyone. Does everyone feel like KD, Cheryl Moore, and Michael Kramer are just the new Jenny K, or will they show back up? Also before I go, I do have an interesting subtext that applies to Requiem that I think is pretty great. So outside of the common usage for the word, I did find that it was used by creators to refer to a part of their work that they won't live to see finished, which I think fits Spencer to a T and is absolutely amazing. Alright everyone, take care, see ya.
Thank you, Yoke. Yes, I like him. I didn't feel much in the RPG. I like the idea of other callbacks. Oh yeah, I went here. Yeah, that would have been quite nice.
Again, a difference of having different characters, much like Sean alluded to earlier.
Yeah.
You know, like having a Spencer-related narrative and not having Chris or Jill involved as a missed opportunity. And I do share that point. It's much along the same idea of like what is in the game with Leon and Sherry not having more conversation. Likewise, if you had a different character, having them reminisce about what Raccoon was like and the locations they'd been to. Jill's got more of a history with Raccoon City than Leon does. Leon's experience was literally a couple of an overnight, basically. Jill would have years of experience of living there, and it's like it is a missed opportunity. Great call on the Requiem statement too. At the end of that call, I think that again adds some depth to just what doesn't matter again which angle you go for Spencer, but just the idea that it's something that happens beyond the grave, that something has been allowed to happen. So
I agree. I agree on the enemy points. I know Sean mentioned it in the last podcast that there is a lack of enemy variety generally in the game, but it's kind of made up for with different zombie types and that kind of thing. But yeah, post Raccoon, there's not a lot going on. I mean, you barely.
I got my hopes up. Because we had the spider, and I was like, okay, so we're getting a bunch of different monsters, great. And then it's like
and it's
basically
mentioned in the other call. And the other call mentioned we could have had hunters. I think hunters would have been really good in Raccoon City. Certainly in I mean, you could have replaced the elite guard with hunters.
That's true.
That would have been better.
That would be interesting
Nicholas,
too.
they're giving you lickers back by that point. Come on.
Yeah,
You've
but
got
as I said, that also leads up an interesting thing where you could have had a licker versus hunter fight.
Yeah, okay, yeah, sold.
Yeah. See, exactly. Like
you've
got hunters stalking around, and then you release some lickers out of a tank, and all of a sudden they're fighting each other, and you're like, yeah, that's what I wanted to see.
Knowing Requiem, they wouldn't do it because they don't have lickers fighting zombies, which I think is still a massive missed opportunity.
I think they should have had more enemies.
Yeah,
at that point.
As I said, it set me up the wrong way because the spider thing, and then it was like some zombies. I was like, okay, cool, and then you basically just get a repeat of the church fight in the the little sewage thing and processing plant thing, and then it's just more zombies, and then there's a chainsaw guy, and then you get some armored BSAA zombies, and then you just get some more zombies, and I'm like, yay, can we change it up a bit more? Again, that also probably adds to the fatigue of that section where it's a bit of more repetition again. Whereas it would have been nice to see some more monsters or some throwbacks or even some of the things. Imagine if they brought back the Gravedigger from 3 because they didn't put him in the remake of 3 and just went, right, there's an opportunity for us to kind of make up for that by having one exist in this. Like, that would have been cool because you end up underground at one point. That would have been awesome.
Probably better than Plant 43.
I mean, I didn't mind the Plant 43.
No, I didn't mind it, but like, yeah.
But again, just having more variety, like, it would have been better than.
Thank you, Yoke. Our next call-in comes in from Jem Mackey. Roll the tape.
Hi, guys. So a few takes from me to discuss. Loved the last 2 podcasts. Overall, I've really enjoyed it and got the platinum after a few playthroughs, so I've really tried to squeeze all I can out of it. However, I do fall into the camp that besides the rush of being back in the RPD, the game never really re-reaches the heights of the care centre, which I thought was an absolute delight. But I still think peaking early has become a bit of a staple of the recent games, Castle Dimitrescu being the pinnacle of Village, and the main bakehouse being the pinnacle of 7, so they're obviously keeping to form with that. I love the gameplay loop of Grace, and the Blister Crimson Heads were a fantastic way to keep me on my toes. I also really enjoyed when you had to hold Emily, making you think about routing and which enemies to kill or leave. Just having an RE game making you plan and think again was fantastic. Naturally, that may be due to me preferring the type of gameplay to actiony RE4 vibes. However, I just think those Leon Raccoon City sections were just so bland, not counting the member berries and the boss battles of the latter stages. There's been a lot of discourse of how RE has now been influenced by The Last of Us, and I think this section was most obvious, but they did it in such a bland way. Essentially 3 or 4 enemy types, everything was incredibly grey. There was little distinction between the 3 main areas you go to for the bomb parts. I get they were going for a Seattle-style kind of level to The Last of Us, but that had a range of different environments with contextual storytelling and a real sense of being in a fallen city, discovering the stories of survivors and evidence of lives being lived and lost. Instead, we got a literal grey sandbox. The closest it came to meet my wants was probably those 1998 letters, which were of course paywalled. I enjoyed the glass and I do enjoy the action gameplay, but I just needed more to engage with the environment. Finding more lore of how people hold up in those final days with the city would have made such a difference, I think. I regularly return to your podcast detailing the history of Raccoon City, and I was really hoping to get some more footnotes to that story. The live-action trailer made me think we would, as that was essentially a self-contained story that we could have discovered via notes, but ultimately I was delighted to get on that motorbike and leave it behind. Lots of people complain about the island in RE4, but I think about the engaging environment we get there compared to the kind of Raccoon Chernobyl we got. Okay, minor rant over. Headline still is, it was a great experience, and as always, let's be thankful it was a roaring success, as it guarantees the franchise is in a really healthy place.
Yeah, so quite another scathing review of the East Raccoon section, and I think as time goes on, this is going to be the area where the game falls down. I mean, he didn't like the aesthetic. I really did, because I find it quite unique. We're so used to seeing post-apocalyptic stuff across various mediums now, and I just kind of liked like I said before, the sun-bleached aspect of it. It really did throw me back to Terminator Resistance, which I also think is quite a unique apocalyptic sort of setting. You know, we if you take the Terminator sort of post-apocalyptic visuals that you see in the movies, Terminator Resistance is quite different to that, because you see a lot of it in daytime, and it's just abandoned buildings and streets, and it's all very dry because it's California, and there's not a lot of grass and foliage and stuff like that, and I feel like Requiem leaned into that to its benefit. We've already seen like post-apocalyptic Last of Us environments where it's all lush and green and stuff like that, and I felt like this was a nice counterpoint to that. So I will always take that in my future playthroughs and really vibe off it, and I do think it's unique in itself. But I do feel, we've talked about it already, most of the sort of negative aspects of the the podcast call-ins we've had on this episode have been to do with that section, and I think that's only going to be amplified over the years as we go on.
Not just because of the gameplay being a little bit dull and tedious. I think what Jem mentions is the fact there could have been a little bit more to engage the player in terms of the files. That's the bit where Sherry and Leon also talk back a little bit, and it's like from the RPD onwards, it's all gun ho, bar the orphanage, and you're like, that's in Act 3, if you want to call it that. Whereas Act 2 with Raccoon, there is time to build up something, and nothing really happens other than collecting bomb bits and looking in tents and whatnot. And it's like you could have done something.
You could have done what the trailer was promising. A live action trailer, like he mentions.
Yeah, that was good. That was good. That was really good.
The inherent thing is, again, you get this hint of thinking it's going to go that way, because one of the first conversations you have when you first get out of the car and start exploring, the first bit of that is you go into that little restaurant, is that Sherry and Leon talk about like what it would have been like. This could have been just another normal town still. And so it was like, oh, they're leading down into that path. I thought I was going to come across files and information about the experiences of people that existed in Raccoon, and then that just doesn't happen. And then, as was definitely mentioned, and we talked about as well, is that putting the one file that did do this was behind the paywall is kind of a bit cheeky. Like, I get in the end, it's basically really it's less about the files, and it's more about an extra charm that you can add to your gun. But like, it should have been the thought that if we can do this file as a DLC because of the charm, we could have put a bunch of these files in about survivors of Raccoon City who perished, and the various notes about the attacks. And it would have been great ideas to add callbacks to some of the things that happened. Could you imagine someone writing a note? I saw this giant creature with tentacles leaping across a rooftop, and like all these things that would have tied into 2 and 3. Things that happened about mentions about the Umbrella rescue squad coming in, and just stuff that would have tied the universe together a little bit, but it doesn't have to be overthought. It just exists because it exists in the other games, even
really,
OT or remakes aside. It doesn't make any difference.
Really rip the fan base's heart out. Like, show a skeleton of a child, and next to it is like faded away tickets for the fucking Raccoon Sharks game or something.
Yeah. Where's Alyssa? Where's Alyssa mentioned? It seems really odd that there is nothing there. Alyssa checking into that hotel or something. A couple of days. It seems very odd that she's not mentioned at all.
Well, was that the other thing about narrative storytelling? You guys remember in OG Resident Evil 3, you had that umbrella soldier who's like where the spiders are, like trying to protect the people that were in the clock tower that have been killed, and they're like webbed up and stuck against the wall, dead, slumped against the floor. And it's like that visual narrative storytelling there told a lot, and it's just like they had real great opportunities for lots of little things. I think visually, graffiti, tags, letters, all sorts of things. Barricades with notes.
That moment you talk about in OG3, I think is one of the most powerfulest. I know GT said this before. One of the most powerfulest sort of environmental storytelling pieces in the series. You know, because the UBCS soldier is reminded of the fact that the girl he's trying to protect reminds him of his sister, doesn't he? So. And then you just find him shielding up, before he's done. But why couldn't the city have been littered with that?
And this goes back to the one thing that, again, going back, I wish they'd taken from, again, if you're going to crib on Last of Us for we're going to do an open world hub thing, which I get they also weren't just cribbing on that. They had this whole idea of obviously going to be an open world game at one point, but again, there's a huge amount of environmental storytelling, as was mentioned in that call, and there's a lot of environmental storytelling, contextual stuff that's going on narrative that builds the world, that builds the survivors or lack thereof. Same in the first game, that whole section in the sewers of The Last of Us, where you find the group that came together and built a little community together, and it all went pear-shaped. It's amazing. It just, the way that narrative is drawn out is a masterclass on how to do a mixture of text and contextual visual storytelling together, and if it's my hope, it's that Capcom's the other bit of the feedback is that we see what you were trying to do here. Maybe you should have gone further with this, and you need to add more elements to make it an engaging environment to walk around. It just can't be a bunch of empty spaces with the goal only being get bomb part.
Is that the section in The Last of Us, Rob, where they've established a little children's nursery in the sewers as well?
It's in the sewers.
It's heartbreaking.
It is, and it's done through a mixture of text that you get, because there's the character Ish who you have been following at various points. He's made his way there, and you found files, and he's managed to survive. He managed to survive the events. So you still find bits of story from him afterwards. But that whole thing kind of progressively gets bleaker as you get through. You start to see the existence of that there.
It's horrible. It broke my fucking heart. I remember it.
It's a masterclass in how to mix your text and your environmental storytelling, and I think that's one of the things I would hope game developers would walk away. We don't have to ape for the gameplay style of Last of Us, and I know people have issues with the sequel on varying levels, but just the idea that constantly the thing that game, both those games do endlessly, is tell narratives in various forms. They don't just do it all in text. They don't just do it all in speech, and they don't just do it in environmental storytelling, but they have a very great blend of all three. And I think that's where these sorts of games thrive on, where you get to feel like this lived experience of the world that you're in, and it's a real shame in that regard.
Thanks, Jem. Our next one comes in from Super Done Man.
Hey guys, Brett, aka Super Done Man here for my first ever call-in. Before I start, I just want to say thank you all so much for the podcast and all the work you do maintaining the website, timeline, and Discord. On to my thoughts on Requiem. I enjoyed the hell out of the game. Before release, I was one of the ones who was incredibly skeptical about Leon's sections from those initial trailers. After the first few hours, I was convinced that this was the right move. Grace's parts are dripping with tension and worry of what's around every new corner. The classic feeling of being stuck with a full inventory and having to backtrack to the goddamn item box so you can make room for a key item takes me straight back to the original trilogy. Leon's sections are, without a doubt, incredibly ridiculous. I was laughing through the entire bike section. Just when you think it won't get any crazier, Victor pulls out an RPG and all hell breaks loose. They were almost channeling the CG movies there. I do think that motorcycle belongs in a museum, being that it's one of the only vehicles that Leon hasn't totally fucking demolished. One thing I did want to mention that I don't think I heard on your review or lore episodes was the music in this game. In Grace's sections, it's full of dread and mystery, and then Leon's, it swaps around from an almost wistful version of the RPD music to full-on industrial rock during the more intense action sections. It felt weird the first go-around, but during my second playthrough, it really felt like it tied everything together. Overall, I feel like it was a great entry in the series and brought some more balance back to the tone. Now I'll have to wait a while to see what happens with the fallout from this, and how Chris is going to have to clean up all this shit. My final note, Batman, I had almost the exact same reaction you did to Xeno. Short of hurling my controller at the wall, I shouted, "Who is this Wesker-ass motherfucker? Capcom, you bastards."
Thank you, Superdome Man. Yeah, we've had a really good call in with the music, and I won't repeat. I think we all liked what the Capcom offered with the music there. I'm getting a positive review, and again, the item management is a good point as well. We haven't really focused on that, but the idea of planning one's route and item management, because you don't get huge amounts of space with Grace, and I'd probably speak on behalf of everyone when you got those coins for the roulette. I assume everyone was going straight for the hip pouch straight away. I certainly was. I was like, I need more space. This is good. This is what we like to do. And thinking, oh, how much health can I take? And then with the blood mechanics, I think that added quite a nice additional puzzle element where the map tells you where blood is. You possibly can't remember how much blood is there. I thought that was quite good.
Yeah, I was going to say, I remember one of my first reactions to the game, because I remember, and this is not to rub this into you guys' faces, but being in the time zone that I was in, I started before you guys had the opportunity to. And I remember the first reaction I had going around the care center, in the first proper section of Grace's gameplay, and that was that feeling that I hadn't had for a long time of, I need to plan out my route because I've only got a limited amount of space, a limited amount of ammo, and I need to get back to the item box, or I need to get to that other side, and I've passed a bunch of enemies I haven't killed, I've tried to avoid, and like figuring out who I need to get rid of and what path to take and all that sort of stuff was a feeling that I hadn't had for a long time. And it was such a great feeling to return to. I really enjoyed that. It doesn't really last on replays because you get a better understanding of Grace's abilities and the mechanics of the game, and you figure out where you've got little tricks and traps. But that's also kind of part of it too. That's the same with the OG. That experience wouldn't be the same when you played Resident Evil 1 the third or fourth time either. You kind of had an understanding of the layout and where you needed to go and what enemies were good to get rid of and what ones to avoid. And so it's not a new experience either in that regard. So I can't begrudge it that, but it was definitely just refreshing to feel that for once again. I haven't for a long time. So yeah, great point too. Definitely.
Certainly not since 7. You're doing a lot of planning. I was
even with 7 though, it was a bit different because 7's engagement was that you didn't always know what was going to be around the corner, but it also still drew you in a particular direction. There wasn't as much backtracking per se in that. No. There wasn't moments.
No. I think the difference is Requiem's road care center layout gives you a much better sense of planning, whereas the Baker House is really good and it does what it does very well. But it doesn't offer you as many alternate paths and things like that. Whereas Requiem allows you a chance to look at that map, think about your plan. I can go this way, I can cut out the kitchen, I don't have to go that way, I don't have to consult, I don't have to go up against the cook again, I can just leave it on that side of the building and all that kind of cool shit. And that's why I said, I feel this was the same feelings I had back in the late 90s. It was just incredible to feel that again. Like you say, Rob, it does not hold up on repeat playthroughs, but certainly for that first, my god.
The other part of it, I guess, is gameplay design around that. Like the Baker House was designed in a way that you solved a puzzle and it kind of moved you forward into another section more often than not. You weren't retracing your step. Whereas there are elements of this where you have to traverse back and forth to get items to unlock other areas. So it's in that classic Resident Evil 1 mention mentality of, or the RPG in 2, where you've got this item and you're on the west side, and then unlock something on the east side, and then when you get to the east side you got to pick up an item that's going to unlock something else back on the west side, and so you're forced into going back and forth and figuring out your routing and paths and item management that way. And so the number of times, I've heard people say it, I think Sean might have said it, I can't remember if it was Sean, but it was someone just talking, maybe it was John, talked about accidentally picking up the item in front of where Chunk appears upstairs and for the access card, and not having enough inventory space, but it still sets off his action, so he turns up and then you have to flee and then either avoid or take him out in order to get back to where you were. Whereas if you had the inventory space and didn't do that mistake, you could just grab it and run, which changes the dynamic straight off the bat. That's a clever bit of game design because it changes based on where you were thinking, oh shit, I didn't have inventory space, but he's still chasing me. How am I going to get back there? As opposed to I've got it, I'm going to run and take off to the door I need to use it for. So very, very different style there alone. And people have obviously found little tricks and weird things that you can do. And also, just directions of setting enemies on each other and so forth like that is also really good in that you've got some options when you go into a room. You don't have to do it the same way every time, or you can plan out different ideas. And I think these all add to that feeling too, that you have options.
Helps if you're competent, unlike me. Right, next one.
Sorry, Nick mode. Sorry.
Thank you, Super Doneman. We've now got a call in from Umbrella Inc.
Hey guys, Umbrella Inc. here. I have to say, as a Resident Evil fan, the opening hours of this game were just pure Resident Evil joy for me. Running around the Chronic Care Center with no ammo, a pencil that I thought was a defensive weapon, and was running around not knowing what to do with that and a wrench was just so much fun, figuring it all out and being scared the whole time. The music in this game, the way there's that little chime when a zombie sees you was so creepy and so effective. It was just a magical experience for me. And as a fan of Resident Evil 4, both of them, the catharsis you get just causing mayhem with Leon was a good time as well. My only gripe or disappointment was the entering Raccoon City section with Leon. It just seemed very brown and kind of a slog, but on replays I've appreciated the flow of it, and it's not bad at all. And of course, entering the RPD with that synthy version of the theme was just a magical experience. I was basically standing up the entire time. I was so excited and full of emotion. The game was great, and I think that Xeno is Capcom's attempt at spoon-feeding us that we're going to get Wesker clones. That's my theory, at least. I hope the DLC gives us more light on that, and all the other questions it left. It's not a perfectly told story, but I think it did a really great service to Leon, and Grace was a really fun character as well. I think as an addition to the pantheon of Resident Evil games, it stands up there with the best of them. Have a great night, everybody. Thank you so much, and keep doing what you're doing. This is my favorite podcast.
Thank you, Umbrella Inc. I think we're already at Wesker clones, to be brutally honest. I'm pretty confident that he is. But another positive look at the Chronic Care Centre. The pencil and the wrench. Who knew?
I want to ask that question. How many people? It seems like this is a common occurrence that people picked up the pencil and did not realize that it was a puzzle right out. Like, I found the pad and I was like, "Oh, this is a pencil puzzle. There must be a pencil somewhere." And so I did it backwards. Found the pencil. I was like, "Great." And then I keep seeing this comments about like, "Oh, I carried this pencil around. I don't know what to do with it," thinking it was a weapon, or I'm going to John Wick a zombie, in the.
I genuinely can't remember. I remember being initially unsure of what it was. I seem to think there's something else that makes you think you can use it elsewhere, but I can't recall what it is off the top of my head. And then I literally picked up that file after, and I think it gave you the prompt. I resolved it quickly, but yes. I do share the fact that there was a moment where I was like, I'm sure this is used for something completely different, than ultimately what it was.
Even if I hadn't come across the pad first, I probably would have picked up the pencil with the intent this is probably for a puzzle, because more often than not, back in the day, the survival horror games would have that cliche of like
glass eye
sketching. Yeah, like an item that you use in a context of a puzzle that would make sense. And so a pencil being used as a rubbing over a thing to find a code or something seemed kind of obvious to me. And so I think maybe that used to be a trope that was so obvious, and nowadays it's not very common, because I don't know how many people, especially young, I know this sounds really bad, this is not being an ageist thing, but I think younger people wouldn't have that concept of like everything's done on tech, so the idea that you would rub a pencil over a piece of paper may be a foreign concept to some people to get what was written on the pad prior and all that sort of stuff. It's kind of funny too. I think maybe that contributed to it. But then I hear people much older that still picked up the pencil and thought it was an item that they could use somewhere else.
I mean, the thing is, I once saw Leon kill 3 zombies in a bar with a pencil.
Fucking pencil.
With a fucking pencil.
I believe you'd do it too. It was only unfortunate that Grace picked up. Grace
If he
picked
can
up
kill
the
a
pencil.
tyrant with an axe, he can kill a zombie with a pencil.
Why not? Why
So,
not?
don't say this, Sean. You know it's going to turn up in the next animated film, right? It's no longer going to be running around with running a motorcycle, shooting out dogs, and running along on the ground.
Vendetta was basically Leon Wick, wasn't it?
Exactly. I'm amazed he didn't take a zombie out with a pencil in that movie, to be honest.
What have you got? It's a pencil, but it's an HB.
Yeah.
The softer lead helps us dispatch them quicker.
Oh, thank you, Umbrella. A lovely positive review, which is nice. We've got another one. We're nearly at the end. We've got a few more call-ins. This one come in from one of our new patrons, Nath Dogs. So let's play the tape.
Hi guys, Nathan here, just bringing forward my review of RE9. In short, it's become my favourite Resident Evil game ever. I thought it had some really good soundtrack and sound effects, especially where you pick up the level 1 wristband before the chunk encounter. It made me feel from going accomplished to dreading the next move. I loved Grace's character, and as a player it felt easy to connect with it, and I thought her voice actor did a really good job of expressing through that fear in her voice. I did enjoy her parts of the campaign more than Leon's, which was a surprise to me, and not something I expected going into it. I absolutely loved Leon's role and character growth within the game, and although his part with the detonator does drag, it's not too big of an issue. I did feel the impact of the return to the RPD, which triggered that PTSD, and I thought they explored that really well in that late conversation in the game with Grace and Leon, with like a desire and a desperation to save her from the same fate. And I thought they did a great job of integrating both campaigns. They didn't halt momentum or create any issues, and I did enjoy the introductions for Grace and Leon at the start of the game, and knowing Leon was infected from the get-go, it just felt very cinematic and executed greatly. In general, I also thought Gideon was fantastic and has become my favourite villain since Wesker. I did enjoy that he was a part of the whole game as opposed to right at the end and exploring his lore. I did freak out when we first saw Xeno though, and although he feels relevant to, no pun intended, the overall connection to the wider lore, he just also felt irrelevant in the game due to his limited screen time. The story to me did lose its way near the end of the game. It's nothing concerning or an issue, but definitely took a lot of twists and turns to keep me engaged. And I did not know about the optional cutscene with Grace and Gideon interacting in his office. I thought that was a really cool feature that I didn't learn about until after I finished playing the game via a YouTube video. Thank you for taking my review.
Thank you, Nathan. What the optional?
So depending on which order you do the front door thing changes the cutscenes that you end up meeting Gideon in regards to, because if you go to there's the chief office upstairs and there's the other office, the one with the pencil in it, funnily enough, changes the order in which he appears. So if you go, so you get different versions based on that. Most people will probably get the one where he's up on the top floor.
Near Chunk comes up.
Yeah, near Chunk, yeah. But there's one in the other office if you do it the other way around, because you know how he turns up and she runs off. Yeah, there's a variation on that. So a lot of people don't know about. But yeah,
I've not seen the other one. I've only seen the one on the top floor. That's amazing. I have to look that up.
Yeah. That was a nice positive review as well. Really enjoying the again. There's lots of praise, isn't there? I mean, across all our call-ins, the chronic care centre is obviously a highlight for a lot of people enjoying that interaction and exploration.
It cannot be understated how amazing a location that is for the series. It just encapsulates everything that makes this series what it is. I think
bit of a mission to get into the garden, though, isn't it?
but isn't that true to RE1, Nicholas?
Absolutely.
That's the idea. That's the throwback right down to the same same iconography of.
I was just thinking of the nerds
out the window.
I want to go. They want to go out into the garden. Oh, well, sorry, you're going to have to go and find some.
Well, it's only because the thing went into shutdown and all the bars went on and everything. I assume that normally that door wouldn't lock that way. But I like the fact that people couldn't determine whether or not this was Gideon fanboying over Spencer as why the motif. But I take it for the fact that the Spencer Foundation used to own that is the connection to the motifs of having the same puzzles as the mansion.
You see, and there's the thing. The crests, the actual sun, moon, and star symbolism is the crests from the OG game. I know they're used in the remake for the gravestone puzzle, but their origin is the OG game. It's the same symbol.
And badged at that door as well. Yeah.
There's all this iconography that's been put through the entire game, which references. I mean, it was partly by design, partly was unintentional that it's coming out at an anniversary, because I know there were certain delays in development, but you've got so many things that throw back to so many of the entire history of the game throughout. I mean, people pointed out in the orphanage. I assume you guys have seen the posts about the toys of the mansion with people
it's
walking towards
amazing.
the
Yeah,
mansion.
it's beautiful. Four bears going into the mansion, and there's a train right next to it.
And they're like, that's an intent. Like, that's so obvious. And things like the obviously the roof that we've talked about with the Zero style fight, the light, and the final boss fight in Zero. But just like lots of things throughout it that are amazing and subtle and not subtle.
Well, the best one, I have to apologize to everybody I've ever known in my entire life. People who know me on the Discord. If you're not aware, listeners who aren't on our Discord, or if you don't follow me on social media, I'm a pretty big Lord of the Rings fan. Like, I live and breathe Middle Earth. I really do. Probably more so. I know where this is probably going. More than Resident Evil. Like, if I had to pick one IP, it would probably be Lord of the Rings. So you have to imagine my apologies and my shame that I have to give everybody that I did not recognise that the Titan Spinner's opening shots are literally shot for shot Shelob's second scene. It's not Shelob's first scene. It's when she finally stings Frodo. It's shot for shot, the same angles and everything, and I didn't realise it till someone on social media pointed it out, and I was like, "Oh my god, it's so blatant," and I never recognised it.
I think you have a good bit of an excuse though, because you don't like spiders.
Possibly, but
may not have been paying so much attention to this fact.
But I
don't like this thing.
When you see them side by side, it's the most beautiful homage. Like, I couldn't be any prouder of the RE team doing that.
It's right down to the skull on the ground, and then the ankle.
Honestly,
the ankle's perfectly the same. It's hilarious.
So good, and I'm so ashamed, and I fully apologise to the Middle Earth community that I didn't recognise it.
It's okay. It's okay. Well, thank you, Nathan, for that call in. Our last one comes in from Jedi Stud, and I think if I remember correctly, he leaves us with a kind of a poignant question to reflect upon going forward.
Greetings and cheers, my Resident Evil mates from across the pond. This is Jedi Stud checking in with a hot take and a quick question regarding Requiem. The hot take I have is Grace Ashcroft is the future of Resident Evil, meaning non-legacy characters. So my question for you is, are legacy characters going to go by the wayside? In other words, will characters such as Grace be the future? I believe so. Cheers, mates.
Short and sweet, but I wanted to end it on that one. I thought it was quite a good way to end our discussion with the kind of future plan. Is Grace the future? My feeling is we've kind of been here before with 6, with a kind of handing over of the baton, so we thought, to Sherry, Jake. That, again, another ending that didn't materialise, particularly with Jake. Yeah, is Grace the future? Are we going to be investigating more with her as she, takes up a more position with FBI? She's obviously still with them at the end.
Oh God, let me think about this. So inherently, if Capcom continue down this trend of making new games that are set in the time period that they're being released, roughly, then the inevitably is that they have to, because as the jokes have been going around, we're not going to be seeing Chris and Leon fighting in the 70s. So if they keep that up, you kind of are going to build yourself into it. But because it's a fictionalized series, you could release a game that's set in the past. You could do one in the future, or in the case of something like Village, you had both. You have your DLC that's set years and years and years in the future. So inherently, it depends on what they want to do. Will Grace return? I kind of get the feeling if you ask me, generally, I think she's a one and done. I don't see her coming back, because I think the narrative set up with her at the end is like she's got an adopted daughter. It's kind of like there's a circle here with her in regards to her mum. I think her continuing just to be an FBI agent. As far as like, will she ever appear again? Well, that's just slightly different. But as a playable main character, probably not. I think she may be a one and done, other than any DLC potentials related to this game. I just think that because her narrative is the complete arc of that thing of her going from being this adopted child to adopting a child, and she's still working at the FBI, and still looks like she's a desk analyst most of the time. What purpose does it entail to have her be brought in other than an outside character that, like, she could play the part that Sherry played in this in a future game, and I'd be like, okay, cool. But as a main playable character, I don't see it personally. Doesn't mean it won't happen, but if you my actual take on that. But that doesn't mean that you won't see other new characters, or that you won't also have old legacy characters coming back, because you can change the time frame that they're in, or we've got to conclude bits of their story. Like Chris's thing is still dangling out there, obviously, and they need to finish that. You've got all the stuff to do with, as I talked about before, with the end of Revelations 2. So that involves Barry and his family and Claire, and there's still stuff to do with Claire and Chris. And obviously, we still have unresolved stuff to do with Leon and Ada that could be resolved.
So you think Legacy's characters almost guaranteed?
Well, the other part of it also is just that they know that they have a massive fan base. Like, like when you see the polls for these characters, they want to continue to bring them along, and that's where the narrative disconnect comes if they keep doing these games that are set in the same time period in the future. You know, Requiem is set 28 years after the events of RC because it's 28 years since that happened in universe and since the game came out. So you can't keep doing that, otherwise it is going to stretch that ability to believe that Leon is still backflipping and kicking enemies in the face at 65. But if they want to establish a game that was actually set in 10 years earlier than this, they can, and that's the thing you can do with this. So I think there's a boundary of, like, we have these popular characters, we have to keep using them because they're popular. That doesn't mean we can't introduce new characters, but we aren't going to be heavily reliant on just replacing all the old guard with new characters. And 6, as you said, is a perfect example of that. Like, you could have easily said, oh well, we're not going to use Leon and Chris again for a while after 6 because they were a big portion of that game, and it's like, no, continue to use them in Village and this and remake of 4. And
final word, Sean.
The founder and owner of the Sherry Birkin fan club, I called this. I said this after RE6. We've had the Baton Pass game, and fast forward 14 years later, and Sherry's only just returning now. And you could argue, putting aside all issues with G-Virus and whether she ages or not, she's now as a character, she's now in her 40s. So all those years of potential great storylines and everything like that, I'm not saying they're past her, because 40's no age at all, but we've certainly not seen her in the same years that we've seen someone like Leon in. And so it's such an issue, because on the one hand, you want fresh storylines, you want more Ethan Winters, you want, fresh approaches to this universe. But then, as I said in the review episode of this game, this made me realise that I love my legacy stuff. And it really hit me hard how much I had missed that legacy stuff, because it means a lot. And I think this series wouldn't be what it is. It wouldn't be Resident Evil if it didn't have the legacy aspect of it. The characters are iconic, and they're always going to be iconic. There's never going to be a moment where people don't love Jill Valentine, Ada Wong, Claire Redfield, Chris, Leon, all of them. You could list another few of these, and they're all iconic characters. And I think Capcom acknowledged this, and I think this is part of the reason why we've gone back to it in Requiem, because they've realised Ethan didn't really gel with people. So as much as you could make the argument that maybe we should be done with Legacy, maybe we should be moving on, whatever they did with Ethan, as much as I liked it, and I think we liked it in general on the podcast, did not ultimately resonate with the wider fan base. I think it's fair to say. And Resident Evil 7 will always be beloved, it'll always be critically acclaimed, it'll always be that game, but I still think even people... I know loads of people on our Discord and the fandom who love Resident Evil 7 can't really be arsed with Ethan, and that's always going to be a fundamental problem when you have a series that's so built around character and iconography. And that's the big thing, is iconography, and this is where Ethan falls flat, because the iconography of, like, how a character looks and how I can cosplay as them and all this kind of stuff is so important. Nick, you know this from when you went to your Comic-Con. You interacted with people who don't even really play the games. They just love the characters and they love dressing up as the characters. This has been a big debate online, actually, over the last couple of weeks. We've seen big Resident Evil content creators address this very problem about what it is to be a true fan. Can you be a fan if you haven't played the games, but you love the characters, you love dressing up as them? And all that comes down to is the iconography of the characters. And you can absolutely say we need to move on with a fresh cast and all this kind of stuff, but every time Capcom do that, they face a gamble of losing that core audience that attach themselves to these characters because they are so iconic. And when you give them an Ethan Winters that is a fucking green raincoat and a blank face, people can't cosplay as that. They can't engage with that. They can't enjoy that. And so that's why that character did not engage. But Leon looking like he does, with all the dad energy he has in Requiem, people can latch on to that.
Yeah.
And that's what will carry this franchise.
The inverse is also true with Grace, because I think that's the reason why people have connected with Grace.
Cool, so cool.
Because she's a well-rounded character that you actually see and connect to and understand.
So unique.
Yeah. And it's not why I don't want to see her. I should probably caveat my comment before. I would love to see her return, and maybe because of the feedback, Capcom will actually go, we'll bring her back. But I think narratively, when they were constructing her, I don't think that was the plan. I think the idea is that she's supposed to grow as a character in this narrative. You're supposed to go from this point of where she is at the start to the end, and that was supposed to be it. That inherently doesn't mean that, if the feedback is that we love this character, she will become another one of these iconic characters, and thus there will be reason to bring her back. And that's it. It's kind of this feedback loop of like what people like. We know this changes region to region. We know Japan has a huge thing on Leon, and that's the reason why Leon's quite often come back. Obviously, different parts of the world, like we've talked about the Jill fans and Chris and all that sort of stuff. So you have these subgroups of fans, and Ada and Claire and all that sort of stuff. And it just depends on, I guess, how vocal those groups are sometimes as to what they listen also to, who turns up and who comes back, aside from narrative alone.
The funny thing is, we talked about the Emily thing earlier, about the fact that felt very much like, well, I said it felt like a very much 11th hour rewrite. The thing is, I feel if they'd left the Emily thing with her being dead, I feel like that would have given more credence to Grace turning up later. Because I think she would have been fueled by the fight and not wanting this to happen to anybody else again. So she would have stepped up and been a future protagonist because she wants to avoid this kind of catastrophe happening in the future. So by rewriting, if what I'm thinking is true, rewriting Emily's fate so she is actually still alive, gives Grace an exit point for the series where she can she can still be an FBI analyst, but she's kind of like her own mother now. She's got Emily to look after, so she doesn't need to come back because she's doing this, bolting on that thing. They've kind of written her out,
and that's where I saw it too. Because as I said, it's a loop essentially, because it's she's done the same thing her mother did, which was adopt a child, and she's now in that position, and so it creates a narrative arc, and so it means that I only see future for her to come back in if she appeared again as a supporting role, because it'd be like, we can call on Grace, she's an FBI agent, she might have some insight on something we're not aware of, blah blah blah. That sort of thing you can angle quite easily, but beyond that, obviously they've made this connection that she's still in touch with Leon, blah blah blah. So again, those things could line up, but as I said, as a main character, I just don't potentially foresee that happening. It just, because of all these reasons that same as Sean agrees with, like it just doesn't call true to me. But again, at the end of the day, if all of a sudden she's proven so popular that Capcom can't ignore it, they'll find a excuse to write a new story that brings her into the fold, because that's the chance. You've got the opportunity to do anything you want with a new narrative. That's also the truth. So I don't believe she will be, but that doesn't mean they can't. But very much conversely, I do not think this is the end of legacy characters or anything about passing more onto new characters. There is too much still left undone and still to be said with them, and the fan bases, as Sean's alluded to, the iconography of these characters and the importance to them, to this franchise, is too big to let that go. And then on top of it, you add the fact there are remakes still to come that include these characters. So regardless, I know they're coming because those are remakes. So yeah, how about you, Nick? How do you feel about this? I guess you get to make your final summary on.
I mean, they've been doing it for a long time with 7. Obviously, you've been having main character, then you've just added Chris at the end as a kind of token gesture. Works well in Not the Hero. If you're going for a slower pace thing, you're quite happy to have a higher action part. Requiem was very much the kind of hybrid, and whether that worked, opinions vary. I'd like them to move on, but I think it would get a little bit stale if they had someone like Grace or Ethan in the same sort of mold, aren't they? Kind of underpowered villain heroes, if you want to call it, and then you have your legacy character turn up at the end and and take names. I think that would get a little bit stagnant. So I was pleased with Requiem's balancing act in that sense. It wasn't entirely just the final act like you got in Village and 7 to an extent. I don't see them dropping any of the characters. I just hope they start bringing back some old ones that haven't been utilised. I'm surprised we haven't seen Carlos back in some way, just because he got a renewed vigor, should we say, from Remake 3. Not surprised, but I don't know. I think they could have done. I'd like them to do more along the lines with Alyssa.
Yeah, let's hope the DLC.
Yeah, but just spiritually, in the sense that I'd like them to, go. Oh, we're gonna bring back
outside
Bruce.
character.
I mean, they're not going to, but they could bring back characters like this that have long been forgotten if it serves the story well. And
missed opportunity to take arc to arc. Really.
Yeah, exactly. There's all sorts they could do. I don't know. They are all getting on a bit. I mean, if they brought back Barry, he must be. Well, he'll be 60. So he'd be very old. He's 48 in Remake 1 in RE1, isn't he? So he's
been maybe in the 70s.
70, yeah. Jesus. So they've got to be careful, and I don't want to see them all in that support role, because I think that it gives them a little disservice. I can still see them doing a kind of big one Avengers style something or other. What we've always said with the characters is that they're so well developed in terms of their skills, it's hard to picture you being scared as Chris or Leon or Jill or even Claire to an extent, which is why they've had to kind of create the Ethans and the Graces of this world to put you back into the position you were. Otherwise you're going to go into a kind of Metroid situation, aren't you, at the beginning of the game? You're going to go into a lab and go, all right, we're going to take him down. Oh, we've lost all my weapons. It's like, no, you're Chris. You would have taken God knows what with you.
And you'd have backup support. And
exactly.
All now you've learned from your experiences.
Exactly. Yeah. It's hard to do a traditional survival horror with Chris or Leon or Claire or that kind of thing, which is why another reason why they're probably doing remakes, because you can put yourself back in that position with the characters that the fans love. So I think you just see it again and again. I think you probably get RE10. It will be either a new character or it'll be another underpowered character, because I think that's the only way it can work with over the shoulder. I'm happy I'm happy Requiem has done very well, because it just means that Capcom can continue to explore different options. Don't rely on one rule set for how the games are going to progress in the future. There's options they could go down, and I think that's ultimately a good thing. We have rambled on for a long time because we've had such good quality call-ins. So thank you, everyone. That was 18 or 19 call-ins, which is our highest ever. So we've gone through all of them, and I hope everyone has enjoyed it. Especially as always, you guys always present different things we haven't talked about and different viewpoints. We've got a couple of common themes, but overall, I think
there's a huge variety of context and just thoughts of things that we haven't touched on. Definitely, I can't thank everyone enough personally for their call-ins and for their kind words about the podcast and everything as well. Just very, very nice to hear from you all, and thank you all.
I echo Rob's words there. We tried really hard to keep it spoiler free, and we could only do that with your help as well, guys. Listeners I'm talking to. We can only give you the environment to talk and chat in, but it requires the help of everybody to maintain that space, not just the mods, not just ourselves, all of you guys as well who listen. You all maintain that as much as we help carry it. So it's everybody's victory that we got to Requiem relatively spoiler free.
There we go. So thank you much. On that note, we'll now finish our podcast with this edition of Neptune's Biohazard Quiz.
The ultimate test of Resident Evil knowledge returns. 100 podcasts later.
Jesus Christ. That's a question, isn't it?
I'm getting a big fat 0 this week.
Yeah, I'm not going to get any of these.
I'm not going to say anything because I know that you will just change the answer or something. Like, you don't even know what the answers are.
Can I just ask, have you had all of these questions independently verified?
And still things don't quite go to plan.
You only have to probably get it right.
Welcome to Neptune's Biohazard Quiz. Batman. Star Tyrant. George Trevor. Robbie McGregor. Mr. Spencer. Neptune Biohazard Quiz.
So we'll quickly go through it's a head-to-head round, ladies and gentlemen, because just two participants. So we're just going to them. So I'll ask the questions, and then you can answer.
Well,
First couple.
What a change. I'm not Nick. I'm not used to this change of format. What are you fucking doing?
Change your format. I just
head-to-head, so he's like, I've got to change it up.
It's outrageous. You didn't brief us on this.
No, I did not. No, I've just thought of it as we were talking. I thought questions 1 and 2 come in
What the
from Jordan Osiris. So question 1 was varied. In the original Resident Evil 1, which book of the Bible does the passcode passages belong to?
I want to. Oh, he's going to ask. Sure.
I have no idea, Nick. Old Testament. I have no idea.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm thinking Genesis.
You would be correct. It is Genesis. Very good. Book of Genesis. I mean, you're not incorrect. You're not incorrect there with Old Testament, of course, but
You're wanting a specific book within it.
Yeah. I thought you knew OG1, Sean.
I don't know the fucking Bible. I apologise to all our Christians that listen, but
there's a whole game based on the original game called Genesis. Anyway, question number 2: in the original Resident Evil 2, the chief of maintenance makes use of the connecting facility on the first and third Wednesday of the month. Who is this chief? What is her name?
Her name? Oh, God.
A little clue there. So who's the, yeah, it's a long-winded way of saying who's the chief of maintenance of the sewers. Rombie, we'll start with you first.
I have no recollection of this at all, so I'm doing a Sean now this time round.
Did you know?
My head is empty. Nicholas, I have no idea.
Oh, no. I'll say the name. Angelica Margaret.
Doesn't even ring a bell.
Doesn't ring a bell.
No.
I know there's a file or facts about access ways, but I wouldn't have remembered who it was.
Oh dear. Right, question number 3: a welcome return of the Where Am I round, updated for Requiem. Right, hopefully I got this right this time. I am in the chronic care centre enjoying a game of roulette. I leave this room and head right. Remaining in this corridor, I ignore the first door I see, but exit out of the second one. Turning right and then right again, I ascend stairs 1 level and enter the only room here. It's a bit dull in here, but I'm drawn to some strange singing. Ignoring the door on the right, following this siren sound into a new corridor, I turn right and take a seat. Where am I?
You want to ask which one of you want to go first?
No, go on, Rob. Go on. Where am I?
You're in the upstairs bar piano space where the singer is found.
Okay.
On the second floor. Yep.
Darren?
I think you're in the room before it on the right, but I can't remember what it is. I can't remember the room, Nick. I can't remember the room. I don't think you've gone into the bar. I think there's a right-hand turn before you go there, and you said the last thing you said was you turn to the right, but I can't remember what that room is.
It's incorrect, Sean. Robbie is right. I am in the second floor bar. Yes. I'm chilling out. I'm chilling out by the gun that I missed, which pissed me off still to this day.
Like crooning on the piano.
Yeah, the second bar and lounge area is what I was looking for. So.
Okay.
Yes, very good. Question number 4. Complete this phrase from the Wrenwood pamphlet. Okay. If you want to get away from the what, Wrenwood is the place to be. So if you want to get away from the what, Wrenwood is the place to be. Stars Torrent, did you know this one?
Bustle. You want to get away from the bustle.
From the bustle, right? Rombie?
Oh, God. I have no recollection.
No idea. Get pure guess.
Get away from... No, I've got nothing.
It's the first file. I think it's the first file you pick up. It's the
this was the one that I missed, too. The first file was the only file I missed. I didn't see it on the bloody whatever it was on the just outside on the street.
Yeah. The answer is if you want to get away from the modern hustle and bustle, Renwood is the place to be. I'm gonna give you that. Was that a guess, Sean?
It was a guess because it just
Very
sounded
good.
like the right thing.
I'm gonna give you that point there. Hustle.
Give me half a point.
I think you deserve a full point for that. I think that's
yeah, especially as we go into question number 5.
I don't like this quick fire bullshit. I need time to think. I need time to mature the answers in my brain.
Mature the answer. That's a posh way of saying Google.
I was going to say, if GT was here, he'd need time to Google. Is that what I was saying?
Well, no, it's not just that, but like the previous question, like I drew it out on my little pad because I don't do notepad or anything like that. I use an actual pad and pen, and I drew out the map when you talk. And I think I just had 30 more seconds. I could have scrutinized it a bit better, and it's killing me.
Final question then is: what 2 orbs are needed to enter into the administration area of Ark? And I'm not looking for red and white.
2 orbs, Nick, is the answer. 2 orbs is the
2 orbs. Do you know what the names of those 2 orbs are? Stars.
I don't. Ruby and Crystal.
Ruby and Crystal.
They've got some really weird
They
names.
do, yeah.
I know one of them for sure.
Go on,
the
then.
other one I'm not sure. One of them's Animus. The
Right.
other one I can't remember.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
I'm going to give half a point to Rombie. It's Animus and
fair.
Noblus. Noblesse or Noblesse, depending on if you're posh, but Noblus orbs. Very good. So they are the orbs you need. So let's have a look at those final scores. It's a win for Rombie with 2.5 out of 5. So
that was hard, Nick. Don't pull that shit again, will you?
Stars TyranT, just the solitary point.
Yeah.
There. Yes.
Generous even at that, thank you.
Yes, I could have given half, but never mind. Well done, Rob. Well done. A good win. Join us next time when we'll have some more questions. We are now heading towards the end of our 0.5 special podcast covering Resident Evil Requiem. Again, I'd like to extend my thanks for all the call-ins. Coming up next, we're entering into the dangerous territory of Resident Evil 30th anniversary and what possible concoctions that covers. Well, we've got a couple of special podcasts planned, which will be revealed at some point. Our next big podcast, you know what? I'm going to open it up to Sean. Sean, I know Rob. I'm going to go up to Rob because he won the podcast. Rob, we can either do, to celebrate 20 years of Resident Evil Deadly Silence, we can do the Deadly Silence retrospective, okay? Or if you're feeling brave, we can do not happy birthday, a Resident Evil Umbrella Corps retrospective because that is 10 years.
Hang on.
Which one are you feeling?
Just let me look something up first. Hang on. Before I give you an answer. This is going to give me a bit more of an idea. Because I need to remember when.
Okay, whilst you're having a look, we've never specifically covered Deadly Silence, and we thought, why not? Because it's a great game, and Sean, you've obviously covered it actually on stream, doing a kind of PCs thing. So I thought it'd be quite a good option to go back, and a little bit different because it's the 30th anniversary of OGRE1. This is a great way of doing 20th retrospective without covering old ground again. So that was that, and it is 10 years of Umbrella Corps. I mean, what a decade that's been.
Well, it's become more relevant again as people keep pointing out.
That's become more relevant. Yeah.
Which is So
Rob, you can decide as winner of the quiz.
This feels like the obvious is to go for Deadly Silence because what I was looking at was the date. So Deadly Silence released right at the start of 2006, and whereas Umbrella Corps didn't release until mid-year. So I think Deadly Silence makes the most sense. I'm going to have to find a way to play this because I have a copy of it, but no console to play it.
Go and borrow a DS somewhere. There we go, ladies and gentlemen. You've heard it there from Rombie. So our next big full feature podcast will be 20 years of Resident Evil Deadly Silence with a nice retrospect.
That means the next one after that that's a big one will be Umbrella Corps.
It could well be. I'm hoping that the DLC's announced before then or something. We can slip in one before Umbrella Corps. So thank you again, everyone, for listening. We hope you have enjoyed our Requiem coverage, of which is now concluded until the DLC comes out. It is goodbye for me, Neptune.
Goodbye from me, Stars Tyrant.
And goodbye from me, Rombie.